it's like...
All right, we're streaming.
It's all but forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's been a resurgence now that people are digging it out, but...
It's wild to me that...
it's 50 years, you know, it's 45 years.
It's wild to me that it's like tomorrow's just like gets a license to do it. And like, it goes to prove that DC Comics is not really a publisher. Like, they're not really interested in making beautiful books. They're really like...
They're
licensors. The holders of licenses.
That's exactly it.
And that proves it. Because you have gold. And you own it. You gave Kirby money, so you own it, and you could do this, but it's not worth your time, you fucking douchebags. It's cornball. We are streaming, Jimmy, and
I would love to have answers from all of these publishers about these topics in terms of, are you against promoting an artist because of what Image did?
Right.
You know, because like you can't license an artist.
It's true.
You know, you can't license Jim Lee.
And you just make them more valuable on the market.
Right.
So like, see, that's that withholding thing. Kind of like with like if Comic Art Fans was to do low res, it's just this withholding energy that doesn't help anybody. Right.
It's funny, you know, you mentioned comic art. The stuff that shows up that like I don't know that I needed that until it showed up, and then it becomes one of the greatest websites in my life ever.
Right.
And had no idea, you know, 2 weeks before I found it, that was a thing. Yeah, I want to talk to that guy at some point. It was cool to bump into him at Baltimore. Comic Arts founder for everybody watching at home. Yeah, these early morning, and I feel like these early morning in between episode conversations are all over the map.
Yeah,
it's a week of charged energy.
Even when we're recording, it might be all over the place. We'll see.
Yeah, that's true.
I am hitting publish on the stream now for our King Kayfabers.
Excellent.
So they're seeing this stuff. I will now send you a link. 1 second, Jimmy. It'll be in the winners and losers thing. Thread. Alright. So the stream is happening. We'll start to get people sneaking in.
Welcome, welcome, everybody.
And we'll start to get set up. Cool.
I've become a fan of the King Kayfabers that join us for these.
It's a new like level of discourse. Like you kind of slough off. Like, I mean, this is the biggest supporters. They're like.
They are, and it feels like we've expanded our conversation circle to be like, oh yeah, we got a dozen of us sitting here, 20 of us sitting here. I don't know, man. It's I like it. It's nice.
Oh, so like, let me put in the comments the big guest for later. It's gonna blow your fucking minds, man.
It is gonna be a big day.
Us all of your Brian Bolland questions about Batman Killing Joke. Isn't that a beautiful sentence?
It is. I used to hate that book. This was my first reread in a while, and it felt totally different than I remembered it.
You know, I was talking with, we'll say Vin, and I was like, dude, we're doing this, man. Like, I know you must have some questions or something. And he was like, you know, Brian Bolland rose to the occasion and elevated, even if it is a mediocre script from Alan Moore, it's still fucking better than 90% of the rest. But he elevated one of Alan Moore's like most dashed out kind of basic.
Is that how that's viewed?
So that's what he said, and that's how Alan Moore views it. Like, you know, it's a trifle. It's just a Batman story. It's not adding any resonance. It's very straightforward. He usually like will put a little bit of spice in there. Has no spice to it. It's just it's a comic yarn.
It's. Do you think the spice is like the R-rated violence? You know, like shooting Barbara and stripping her and taking pictures and showing up to her dad. I mean, like that is some R-rated shit.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, she's raped. I think it's implied.
I thought that too, and I didn't think that on the reread.
Yeah, I do because there's like, I think there's something that says something like much worse, and then here's the other part, like you keep showing him enter doors. Psh, like you enter the first door and then you see this. And then there's the first tier of panels on a page. It's like we're just entering new doors. It's fucking Dante's Inferno. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. They just ain't showing that shit to you, man. That's what I think about it.
Yeah, you may be right on that.
We'll talk about it in the conversation.
Yes, we will.
What are they saying in the chat about our guests, man? Running that artist edition.
I've had such a lag on my internet stuff lately, and I don't know what that's about. It's been happening at home.
Yeah.
I've had such a lag on my internet stuff lately. I don't know what that's about. Yeah, get the question about the colors.
Yeah.
Definitely something I'm interested in hearing about.
High on our list for sure.
I was telling Ed, there have been a few of these books that have been recolored that the artists say they like the new color better, and I wonder if that's based on seeing it on screen. Like, I'm totally on that kick, so that's been my thought on some of these color choices. But I don't know. We'll see what the man has to say about that. Kevin Freer just subscribed to Patreon 10 minutes ago. Welcome, Kevin.
Yeah, man. Smart man. Smart man.
Yeah, Kevin says the colors are the most controversial thing about that book to comic book nerds. It is wild to me, the recoloring and everything. We're going to look at some Kirby stuff today in our recording session, and there's stuff there that was drawn in like 1970 and is colored for the first time in this new book, and it is weird. It's they do a lot of great stuff in that book that we're going to look at with the Kirby stuff, different paper stocks in the same book, based on what we're seeing, like original art reproductions, colored, they all get this treatment. It's very considerate, but at the same time, like, it makes me think about coloring, and like, it is challenging. I think the way books were colored in the past, I don't know. I think you almost have to stick with that palette.
I mean, it was drawn for that palette.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Jack Kirby drew differently when a thing was for black and white. Like, there's evidence of that. You could point to like the like those 70s DC mags and shit, and see how the art differs.
Yeah, Caleb asks how many terribly calibrated screens are responsible for bad colors in comics. I think it's more than the calibration of the screen. I think your screen can be perfectly calibrated. It's just it's literally a different color model.
It is. It's RGB. You're shooting white onto a black surface as opposed to paper, which is white. So that's the difference. It's RGB versus CMYK, and you could see it like when you color like on that fucking Procreate shit. That's RGB, and when you bring it into Photoshop and look at it CMYK, there's blacks in that color. You just can't have that.
Yeah, and even the just seeing it through backlit, like being on a screen that's illuminated, it's a totally different experience. So I don't know, that's a tough one to overcome. I always talk about, I used to do like 2 versions of every color file, one for print and one for screen.
Right.
And I've gotten away from that, but I mean, that's the reason why, because it's a different medium. Chris Pitzer posted a thing from DN Agents where they talk about the eclipse coloring.
Yeah.
And it has like a 70% screen.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, like, when you look at that old 64 color palette, it's 0, 25, 50, 100. I did 75 in mine, which was a cheat.
Right.
We were talking, we're like, oh, I guess I colored Aphrodisiac wrong.
Right.
It's pretty interesting, though, what that extra color really adds. And then I was looking at that, and I was looking at Kamiko. Yeah. It was a lot of mud.
Kamiko sucks. Kamiko adds black, and so there's so much diarrhea. Like, they add black so that they can say that we have 400 colors or something, but you cannot use all those colors. But they did, and it resulted in a very dated. It felt dated at the time. You know, like I remember getting those comics as a kid and just being like, this is kind of trash.
It is fascinating, everything, all the coloring in the 80s. Because once you get outside Marvel DC, like if you're an indie guy, indie publisher, like all of them tried to do, got to make our books look better, right? Can't be as good as, you got to be better than if you want to compete. And they all brought different stuff in, like the Kamiko and the Eclipses with the extra percentages added, but also like all the Blue Lines people that showed up.
The Blue Line stuff, man, the Baxter paper, all that stuff. It was like, what's the tech guys have this old phrase about at a certain point television technology was in a place where you just had to build the nicest wooden box to put the like that was that era where it wasn't about innovation in terms of fidelity or any of that. It was just like, doesn't just look like a piece of antique furniture. It's going to be in your house. It's going to be big and boxy. Why should it not just be beautiful? And it's like, here, look at our nice white paper. And it's also the thing that fucking Steve Jobs rails against. Like in all of his promo stuff, we do not care about the technology in the soles of your shoes. We want to know that it can make you jump higher, and like the quality of life improvements that this piece of technology or that this thing can bring you. And that's the rub that, you know, that's a mistake that those guys fell into while promoting shit. You know, like, who cares about your Bondo paper? You would see it in the ads, you know, 32-page Baxter paper, blah blah blah. Who gives a fuck about that, man? Is it good?
Man, a couple of great questions for Bolland is when did he first switch to digital?
Yeah.
And the reason I think that'll be a great question is I have that black and white Killing Joke, and in the back there's a bunch of the Batman covers that we know are digital. And I wonder if there really is a moment like in that cover run where he switches. So that'll be a question to see if he can point to one of those. Yeah, I was looking at all those, and there's some interesting textures in many of those covers, and I'm like, is that a digital? Is doing digital what allowed you to put that texture in?
The impetus for this even happening is that Brian reached out to us after watching some of our videos, like the artist edition video that we did with him, and basically answered our questions, like our questions that we had in the video. Like, there's a Judge Death piece. I'm gonna put that heat down. So there's that Judge Death piece, and we're like, what the fuck did he use back there? Like, what kind of tool? What kind of instrument? And he just was like, he hit me up and was like, oh, I have this rag that had like a cool texture. I just kept rubbing it all over the artwork. So I'm like, Brian, you gotta come on, man. If you're watching all these videos, set things right.
The other question somebody mentioned that I'm curious about is how much is reference and from the noggin. And I think going through a book like that will really be a good chance to point out like the difference between those two things. You know, like, see exactly what he is, how much is he pulling from reference.
The wrists and the hand, like, I've been on that kick lately, like just looking at that stuff, and the shit that he does with the hands, it's like you have to just be going like this constantly while drawing.
Yeah, I mean, I said it when we talked to him before, so anybody on here, if you haven't seen our Brian Bolland shoot, like, go watch it. He answers some of these questions, he talks about this stuff, but his figure work is so impressive to me because of it should feel stiff, and it doesn't.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to explain yesterday to some people's, man. It's like he has the academic drawing chops, but he's able to add cartooning into it to prevent the stiffness, to prevent the stodginess.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
And that's the extra piece.
We always say, like, if you do something really well, it's invisible.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what he does there.
It is.
You know, there's a sleight of hand where it's like there's enough cartoony to make that stuff alive.
Yeah.
But really hard to point out as being like, that knee's a cartoon knee.
And we've had enough people come through.
It's like a kayfabe.
On our shoot interview, in comments or in DMs and stuff, and they would talk about, like, they would get a head sketch, you know, at a convention, and it's like, you just got to give it to him the first day, and he just can't allow himself to do a bad drawing. But they said they would observe him, and he was doing that. He was doing that, like, measuring shit with the pencil.
Yeah.
And just keep fucking with it. Maybe tighten the light bulb, maybe a little bit. But it's the wire, dude. Keep fucking with the wire. But we gotta solve that.
This might need a new light. Once it gets unreliable.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll put in that order. Yeah, keep the power on and then just fuck with this wire, man. Just try to like push it in. All right, and just let it be. Sit that shit down and fucking let it be. Gave us a 4-year run. What more could you ask for?
Absolutely.
Hit it, Jimmy. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Today we're going to be taking a look at the most brutal war comics in the history of the medium. But first, got to appraise you guys of the Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. If you want to mitigate that kayfabe effect, you jump on there at our big support level. It even gives you the opportunity to hang out with us in a chat room while we stream these videos live. And you get to see these videos before anybody else in that case. The videos are also brought to you by the books that we make. And before you see the bibliography of our works out there. I have a new Red Room series coming out in 2023, Crypto Killers. And you can pre-order that now at your comic shop. It's going to be coming out, I guess, within 3 months of this recording, if that's how that game works. Jimmy has Street Angel Deadliest Scroll Alive, Plain Jane's, Hulk Grand Design, Treasury Editions coming out end of February. Get your hands on that. I have X-Men Grand Design and Hip Hop Family Tree celebrating its 10-year anniversary in 2023. Now that all that stuff is out of the way, we are going to crack open our Holy Scripture one more time, Jimmy. A Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics. The value of this book is that it's going to provide us an opportunity to talk about the John Stanleys and the Carl Barkses and look at the earliest Action Comics ones and Walt Kelly's, but in a consumable format that is widely circulated. You could get the Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics reasonably cheaply. If you're in the Kayfabe chat room, here's the cover, and they're getting the cheapest copies off the net if you don't have a copy yourself. But we'll be able to dig into these various creators and have some conversation and discourse, because any of these issues of Two-Fisted Tales or Frontline Combat that Harvey Kurtzman edited is ripe for the picking. And I'm sure eventually, keep this channel rocking long enough, we will start to cover a lot of that material. But we have 2 strips here we're going to look at.
I absolutely love these war comics.
Yeah.
The first EC box set I bought was Two-Fisted Tales because of my love for this stuff.
It was before we hit the record button with Dave Gibbons on the very first shoot interview. Could see, and that's the fun thing too, when you're in the studio with these guys and you can look behind their shoulder and you see their bookshelves, and like a red beacon, you could see those Russ Cochrans on people's shelves from a distance. And I said, I judge a cartoonist by the Russ Cochran EC reprints they have. And you got to have the Kurtzmans, you know, the war books at least, but Mad, obviously. And he was like, you are correct.
Yeah.
So these are from various war comics that Kurtzman edited. Frontline Combat 4 is where Airburst first appears. And then we're going to look at another strip, Corpse on the Engine, which showed up in Two-Fisted Tales 25.
Yeah, these are great because they are Kurtzman's finish also,
yeah,
which,
his
you know, a lot
complete
of those
process.
comics, he's writing and doing layouts, but not necessarily the finished art. I love his finished art, so it's cool to actually see that. And man, kudos to the editors of this book, because they really did. I mean, they nailed this.
Yeah.
For an early collection of like a survey of early comics history. They really did well.
It's true. And there's good material up front to kind of give you context.
Yes.
And Kurtzman, the guy who did the most brutal war comics that stick with you forever, is also the spearhead of Mad Magazine. And it talks in the text about how that is a sort of consequence of... Mad is a consequence of doing these brutal war comics that are highly researched.
Yes.
And laboriously constructed in terms, like, everything you see is kind of legit in terms of how things would be, how platoons would move, the vehicles of the time, and the jobs of each soldier. Like, he rigorously researched this to the point that he got jaundice from just spending too much time awake and in the library and doing the writing part. Stuff that's very much dashed over, certainly in the 1950s comic book medium, where it was just GI Joes running around doing crazy shit. He lobbied for a humor book that would be a little bit easier on the system,
A little less research
on the Constitution.
It's unbelievable to think of his output.
Yeah.
So he's writing and doing layouts for a dozen of these short stories a month, like 2 issues of War Comics and an issue of Mad.
They're bi-monthly.
Okay.
So he's
That's a little helpful.
He's doing a book a month. Absolutely, he's doing one of these issues a month. So 4 stories, and sending those guys back to fix shit. Joe Kubert did 1 story for Kurtzman, and I asked him about it, and he was like, "Fuck that guy!" Like the amount of times that he sent me back, and even at the time, Joe Kubert was having PTSD of his Kurtzman time, because he picked up the what do you call it, man, the contract for like PS Magazine, whatever that turned into in the 2000s when I was there, and so he's doing this stuff for the military, you know, the thing that Will Eisner did World War II. And he's drawn fucking Sergeant Rock tanks and shit like that. And they're like, no, man, like we don't have that. Like that ain't a tank. That's like a comic book tank. Like we have this. And
it's a working tank.
He had I forget what the fucking jobber kids, like he would identify like the best students and pay them. And I forget what his like license illustration, like his Continuity Studios type thing was, in the basement of the Kubert school. And all these guys were doing is doing the most technical drawing with compasses and circle templates and to get tank treads properly, and just real boring stuff. It's almost like super graphics. It might be like Infographics is the name of that LLC or whatever that he had. It's a secret. Like nobody knows that part of the Joe Kubert business.
That's interesting. He should have got the infographics.com on that, and he might have been more valuable than any of the work he did.
Yeah.
One last note before we dive into the actual stories here, and I think it's in this intro. They talk a little bit about EC Comics and how some of the EC Comics, like the sci-fi stuff, for instance, weren't very successful.
Yeah.
But Gaines was such a believer in that stuff and liked that stuff so much. It's almost like the horror books would subsidize the less successful books.
Yeah.
But it was this attention to quality.
Yes.
It was almost a commitment to quality, which so rare in comics publishers, you know, and for reason. Like you have to maintain the bottom line if you're a publisher or you're not in business.
Yeah.
But it was a guy who cared enough that it was like, we'll publish some of these books that aren't as successful because I just believe that they're quality and want them to exist.
Still happens. I remember the very first SPX I went to, Kim Thompson, Gary Groth up there on stage, naming names of very legendary cartoonists who they published.
Yeah, I remember some of these and being heartbroken because they were guys I loved.
Yeah, who don't sell a book, but you do it for the good of the culture. And I would say that comics is the last place where that's done. You know, if you're a musician, you better hit with your first thing or else they're not going to fuck with you anymore. But comics, there's still leeway. Without further ado, let's jump into Arrowburst. And this feels controversial off the start, where you are not following around G.I. Joes, man. You're following rival army, Chinese, I believe.
Yeah, communist soldiers and contemporary. This is 1952, man, and this is the Korean War that we're seeing here from the enemy's point of view.
I dig, man. So they're getting fucking carpet bombed, essentially.
We're following this small platoon as they are being killed one by one.
4 dudes left. Kurtzman is always good for his infographic stuff where they're setting up traps and you're seeing it laid out really, really well.
Very clear.
Very clear. You got 4 guys. You see the carpet bombing happening. As they advance to the camera, boom, that bomb goes off right above their heads, takes 2 dudes down. We got 1 doofus left and 1 reasonably adept soldier left. They call him Big Feet, so that's a good piece of physiognomy. Like you're a big goober. You know, it's Gomer Pyle from fucking...
And it'll come back.
It all comes back.
There's so much economy in the story. I love this story, too, because it's almost all told with dialogue as opposed to, like, captions, which a lot of EC comics are very caption-heavy. But here it feels very personal, and that's perfect for this story because we are watching human beings suffer through a war zone.
Look at this fucking 1950s camouflage, baby. These poor bastards. It's a miracle that the body counts weren't even bigger with that stuff. You see the advancing airplanes. You see the gunfire, and our guy Bigfoot, he's flaking out, starts to run, kills the sort of more senior member of the squad. So now Bigfoot's the only dude left, but he has a little bit of compassion. He's not so yellow. he's not so chicken that he won't try to save his guy who is still alive.
And it speaks to that thing you said at the beginning, Ed, of like showing this from the enemy point of view. Like,
it's humanity.
It really is. Like, this guy doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Very easy to relate to. You know, like, outside of whatever politics are involved in this war, what you're watching is just a young dude that's like scared for his life, watching his you know, felt his peers being blown up and mortally wounded. I mean, it's real easy to relate to these.
Imagine the balls also where you have a Joe McCarthy, like, witch hunting anybody who is against the party line, and you're putting these kind of comics out. Makes you wonder, is this maybe some of the stuff that was the impetus for the real reason behind these Senate subcommittee things, man?
I just saw, I read a summary of a book, and it talks about the government influence on comics and as propaganda at this time period, but also the stuff that they were coming down on. You know, it was like two sides of the government being like, okay, do more of this. We don't want this.
Right.
And I mean, you got to wonder where a comic like this would fall under that sort of scrutiny. But to Kurtzman's great strength as a storyteller, like you pointed out, these airplanes, it's so clear again, far away, medium shot, closer. You could be illiterate and read this comic.
Absolutely. And just playing with the dynamics of the panel sizes, when the guy gets mowed down by the gun turrets, you get a bigger piece of a moment. Like, these are syncopated rhythms. Boom, boom, boom. And then you got boom with this bigger panel. Because it is a more weighty scene. Yes. Our guy Bigfoot here throws on the camo once again. That was already established. The damn planes see him. Mm-hmm. So they're dropping leaflets.
Yeah, not bombs this time.
Yeah, leaflets on their head. Which, if you want to go American propaganda, look at G.I. Joe doing the right thing. He ain't just mowing down the dude.
There you go. But these leaflets are not without purpose. These are for surrender.
You
hold up these papers, and that's basically a white flag, which is punishable by death on the enemy side.
Right, and it's all explained here, man. If we get caught by one of our leaders with one of these things, we're done. But he says, fuck it. I'm done, man. All my homies are toast.
Yeah, you mentioned brutal, Ed, again and again with these comics. This might be one of the most brutal comics, period, I've ever read.
It sticks with you forever.
Everybody's dead except for his last guy's dying on his shoulders. And he's stuck with the decision of, well, do I just stand here and be shot by airplanes and bombed to death? Or do I surrender against my country? And if I get caught with that, I'm killed by my countrymen. Like, awful.
The book Catch-22 is a wartime novel. Full of that kind of philosophy and you know, story mechanics. It is an EC comic, so you got to have your O. Henry joint, and we saw them establish that sort of tripwire bomb a bit earlier. Our guy Bigfoot, in haste, running towards the Americans to surrender, goes through their tripwire, fucking explodes as the Americans advance, and you just see their fucking brutal remains. It's not grisly in terms of the imagery. You're not seeing body parts and legs and feet and things like that. Like, this is what you're getting. Props to the color in all of these comics.
Very good color in the
probably story. Marie Severin, but I would bet that Kurtzman, he seemed like a very type A guy. Probably
some control.
Had some influence on that. I look at the explosion panel, dude, and I think about your the design idea of, like, if you introduce a color, use it 3 times, and looking at, you know, the 3 or so uses of white as an accent on the focal point imagery.
In a 6-page story, I am always so impressed by the short story. The economy of the short story, if done well, to me is my favorite version of a story. And I'll tell you, man, he tells an epic in 6 pages here. Yeah,
even told well. Like, you have to write that differently than you would something more decompressed, and you have to use a little bit more dialogue to advance some things at this level. Got to establish that the guy's a boob. Got to establish a lot of things, and had to have setup and payoff. That's you gotta figure that out, man. We took that screenwriting course, and one of the lessons was, like, don't have something happen on page 14 if it pays off on page 15. Like, you gotta build that in much earlier. Corpse on the Engine from Two Fisted Tales 25. We looked at this artwork at a microscopic level in one of the artist editions, either EC Volume 1 or 2.
Yeah, the other video I would point you all at is there's a Harvey Kurtzman kind of biography monograph that we looked at in the past, and has a bunch of his layouts, including I think a page or two of layouts from this story, and you really see a storytelling in those layouts. I was looking at them this week because I was doing layouts for a story, and I was looking at those and the Dan Clowes caricature layouts.
Yeah.
But the Kurtzman layouts, man, they're almost as good as these pages.
Absolutely. There is and this is also an example of where the caption dialogue, the words are not really just explaining the pictures. Like, you're getting a lot more context, you're getting a lot more humanity in the verbiage, and then you're seeing this grisly stuff happening. Obviously, there will be parts where, you know, the caption will be calling out ammunition boxes, ration cases, shell tubes, and you see all those things, but it's just setting you up for the rest of the issue, the rest of the story. And check this out. We probably called this out on the artist edition. You got the white water, and like the black is the focal point in this sea of negative space. Flip the page, and the water is black, and you have this white object floating down the river that provides that focal point.
There's frequently like Robert McKee's story is a writing book that I've seen, you know, Bendis champions it like it's his Bible. And one of the things that McKee talks about is if a scene starts positive for one character, it should end negative for that character. Right. And I feel like this is the visual art equivalent of that. Like, we went from white water, now we're flipping the page, or we're doing another 3-panel series of this. Now we go to the black art. So from a visual standpoint, it's almost like you're going back and forth on keep this interesting, don't repeat it, even though it's sort of a repetitive scene.
Let's keep that in mind, man, because we have our guy who's doing okay. Like, he's alive, he's got plenty of food, all that good stuff. He's watching his body, and he's you know, contemplating life, man. Like, how many bodies is this? He's wondering about the guy. Yeah. Like you know, this is a human fucking being. How did he get mowed down? Having his rations, eating, enjoying life. You establish the bush in this panel, and then guess what? There's a guy in there, so his life is about to change. This is one of those kind of, it's a little wonky because like he's supposed to be eating, but Kurtzman's trying to sell us on the eating. Has the head turned, but it looks like he notices the guy, but the dialogue suggests he doesn't, and look at the surprise, you know? So that's a weird piece right there.
It is. Some of this stuff's hard to do. You're doing almost multiple moments and switching point of view. Like, it's pretty complex.
Yeah. Just an exact side view would have been enough. Our guy who's hiding in the bush, man, he's hungry as fuck. So this is a ravenous guy. You know, like, this dude, he wants your food. He wants everything. All that our GI can do is kick his rifle so that nobody has it, and they both are kind of at war, but the I don't think they say, you know, I guess maybe it's Korean.
Yeah, it'd be Korean or Chinese. I believe we're both involved in that conflict.
Smacks our GI's gun hand. So now you're injured, and you don't have a weapon, but you got a bayonet. So it's that thing where it's the hopeful piece.
I want to point out the color, because you mentioned it in the past, and I think these comics again and again are really well colored.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm talking about like how well depth is created, focal points.
Totally.
It's just very clear storytelling once again, and I think the coloring contributes to that.
Oh, here's the piece. He pulls out the bayonet and then gets his hand jacked. Mm-hmm. So now you're without a weapon, and the advantage is with the other guy.
Yeah, that big stick is definitely an advantage in these close combat.
Yeah. So,
it's reach. You know, when you see two boxers and they do arm length, the reach, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah, man. But our guy just bites the bullet, lunges at the dude. They fall into that Imjim River as he holds the guy's head down, and he's just talking about, in the dialogue caption, he's talking about like what it was like to like dunk your friends in a swimming pool as kids, and just think of it in that way as you're destroying this guy. As the life goes out of our dude, it becomes just black. Mm-hmm. He talks about the blood and the bubbles and things, so like, you know, you could imagine that that's bloody water or something, and just it becomes just a sea of black. Less and less bubbles each panel. Kurtzman is very well known for and very good at these panel to panel moments like this. You know, he has 3 examples of the same kind of structure of the struggle, the submerging, second after second, and then
you see those bubbles just going away. I think he's also a great formalist, and whenever I see stuff like this where it's all black and it's ink, it's almost like, what are the elements that he has to play with?
Yeah.
And it is literally, it's ink or it's not ink is
Right.
what he's putting on the page. And to just basically take over those panels with black as we see this guy die, or we don't see him die. We see the black just fill the panels, and we interpret that as death. Pretty strong stuff, and this is pre-comics code.
Here's the other...
Very restrained.
Yeah, here's the other part of the story that is noteworthy. As our rival soldier, the body count is added to the river. There's yet another body floating down the river. In the dialogue, when he's kind of philosophizing about how one of these bodies, like how did this guy die, he's coming up with scenarios. Got carpet bombed, got shot down, yada yada. Could it have been close quarter combat, hand-to-hand combat? Oh, we don't do that anymore. He used the word remote control. It's a remote control war, and like if it was remote control then, what is it now? And then you realize, sure, these guys would think that stuff. They would probably have been around for some of the early 20th century wars and shit. And if you listen to stuff like, or if you read up on like Winston Churchill, that motherfucker was like fighting wars with on horseback with like a saber.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like he was a part of those kind of wars. So certainly a different type of war here.
Absolutely gorgeous marks for like the submerged limbs. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's real good. I mean, he's inventing this. This is completely abstract. It does not look like this at all in real life. Because we have the guys who do that. You can look at an Otomo or something, or a Frazetta, and they will do an interesting magnification thing or something like that. It's total shorthand, but it's all you need.
The lifelessness of that body is it doesn't just drift, but also like turns in the current. It's such a great, it's not stiff, but it feels totally lifeless.
Yes.
And I love as you get to the last panel, it's no longer identified as a body. It is literally like these marks.
Yeah.
Like it's really become this, as it's talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's just one more, it's cheap.
Yes.
And
you notice that bookend sequence. When you read Alan Moore interviews where he talks about the importance of Kurtzman on like Watchmen storytelling or just his storytelling in general, and then you realize that there are very many Alan Moore stories that are like this, that are bookended in this way. This is a little bit of the stuff that he's talking about.
This is another hallmark for me of short stories. Because they're short, you can control every element. There's no extra element in a, I don't know, this might be an 8-pager, but there's no
6.
room for extra. Wow, even more impressive. It feels bigger.
Yeah.
It feels bigger. Incredible, though. And again, love this Smithsonian book for showing off stuff. If you got hold of this as a young kid before you had any How to Draw Comics or Robert McKee's story or any of this stuff, man, you could learn a lot from this book.
It's all here, man. Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics. Not the last time we're going to look at it. Jimmy, if you're good to go, I'm good to go.
Yep.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell. We'll notify you when new vids are available. And if you are a King Kayfaber on our Patreon, you're watching this stream at this very moment and you're getting these videos before anybody else. Jimmy, tell the people what you have out there.
Hulk Grand Design coming to comic stores February 22nd. Pre-order it now because it is on the rise. Hit #1 bestseller on Amazon this past week, so those copies are going fast. Reserve yours if you haven't already. Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, and Princess of Poverty. Pick those up now, as well as the Plain Janes, and you can join me on patreon.com/JimRugg, where you can see a lot more of my comics and art, and you can see the paintings I did last week. I did a big post on those, so join me there. Thank you.
Red Room Crypto Killers 1 is being solicited in comic shops right now. Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit is the name of the game. Each issue completely self-contained. There are 2 trade paperbacks out there in the wild as we speak. Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings. Hip Hop Family Tree is it's a 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree. 4 volumes of that are out there. X-Men Grand Design. Grab all these books. You can read the serialized Red Room comics before they hit paper at my Patreon. All those links in my link tree in the description below this video. Jimmy, tell the people what else we have out there.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, stickers, and lots more at our spread shop. That link is also below this video.
Another great way to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, given those marching orders will be on our way.
Read more comics.
Want to give me that guy?
Not really. I'd like to take that one home with me.
It's another one of those bootleg artist editions where this guy got hold of high-res images from the whole tenure of Lone Wolf and Cub and made a fucking sexy book out of it. Some repeats. So it's a de facto artisan edition. Well, we'll get into all that. Let me just hook me up, Jimmy, so that my sleeve ain't. And we'll be quick with this one because.
Good.
Yeah. Let me take a couple sips real quick because I'm fucking thirsty as hell. We started shooting like 30 minutes after I woke up. Manola Hernandez.
I just can't believe this is a...
Save it. Hit it. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
We have another black market bootleg contraband artist edition that we're going to be taking a look at here today. But first, got to let you guys know that we have a Patreon that you can support the channel, and you get all the videos well ahead of time. And if you're at the highest level of support, you're watching this video stream in real time as we are recording it. Plus, you get access to everything that we post before anybody else. The videos are brought to you also by the books that we make, and this is a spread of the stuff that we have out right now. Crypto Killers Volume 1 of the next Red Room series is up for solicitation in your comic shops. So go to your local shop, put in that pre-order. More news on that later. Red Room is the focus right now. Hip Hop Family Tree celebrating its 10-year anniversary. X-Men Grand Design and WYSIWYG. Jimmy has Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive trade paperback in stores right now. The Hulk Grand Design trade paperback is going to be available at the end of February. Plain Jane's. Scoop Up our books. Support the channel. And big shouts this week to Manola Hernandez, who, when we posted that Sal Buscema bootleg artist edition that Ian Chowgren set up and put together, sent us one copy, sent us two copies actually at this point. You make the video, you grab a couple of snaps, you put it up on the social media, you promote the stuff, right? And you have certain responses. You have the guys who are absolutely lying, who are like, oh, I thought I was the only guy who does that and has no pictures provided. So you ask, prove it. And you never hear anything. It's crickets. And then you have the other guy who's like, oh yeah, I've been doing this, man. And shows a bunch of photos of a 450-page Goseki Kojima artisan edition from Lone Wolf and Cub that he constructed himself and has been sitting on for a hot minute. And he shows pictures off of that. So you get in a conversation and say, dude, how do I get this book? What do I got to do to get this book? And one shows up at the office, in a couple of days.
One.
Yeah. Manola,
that's not right.
You're going to kill the channel, Manola.
You know what? As people continue to do this and send us stuff, let us know where you're actually having these printed.
Yes.
Because this is stellar, Ed. Yeah. I looked at this morning for the first time. I cannot believe this is a print-on-demand book. It's absolutely gorgeous. Publishers, look at this and then do a copy. Like, commission the guy to design it. We've seen artist editions and we've seen English editions of Lone Wolf and Cub, so we know the license is out there. This is a phenomenal book.
Yes, and frankly, if the licensed Lone Wolf and Cub artist edition was to get an artisan edition, it does not surpass this because they have a finite amount of stuff that they can show off. All that material is in here and so much more. This is a cover painting of all the Tankobons.
It's so gorgeous and it's so loaded. 450 pages, we could do episodes just on the painted covers.
Little Daigoro has the 1999 art school girl haircut. Tell me Goseki Kojima was not using that Toshihiro Mifune guy as the main reference.
It looks like
for
it. Yeah, it sure looks like
Ito.
I'm always shocked by these mangaka that are able to do color and black and white at a high level.
Yeah.
Like page after page of these paintings. They're so attractive.
The guy's just he's a full illustrator, man. And he came up through the Sanpei Shirato school of cartooning, so he's able to sling those watercolors like those Kamuis.
Everything. Every toy he's got in his palette there on display.
Yeah. A little wet on wet with the backgrounds there.
It's gorgeous stuff.
Ooh, Old Man Yagyu about to come through.
It'd be interesting.
Look, I love the depth, like when he's able to do that kind of stuff, where you have the foreground leaves and the background leaves.
It's so interesting too to think of like how you do this now digitally on an iPad. You know, you have your brush is translucent, so that background you're hitting it once at 25%, but you hit it 3 or 4 times to get that foreground very saturated.
And then like this thing where you put them right on top, you know, as like the final accent piece, and just creating that full atmosphere. This is the kind of thing that, like, when you're a little kid and you're doing your first drawing, and you put the twinkle in the iris of an eyeball, and before your eyes, like, that eyeball just becomes wet and has more life. Like when you're adding, you know, have a sponge or something and you're adding this white, like that's the next level version of that. Doesn't that say everything?
Talk about restraint too.
Yeah.
You know, the confidence to do a piece like that. But several of these pieces feel that way. You know, there are paintings that look like, oh, this guy's this master painter, incredible illustrator, and then there's this stuff that's restrained and thoughtful and so effective.
The first time you hear of Goseki Kojima from the lips of Frank Miller, think about Silent Night. You know?
That's a beautiful. I mean, that's a great example of that restraint.
Yeah.
Almost a concept.
But I'm saying this is the cover.
Yeah,
that's
brilliant.
Marv, you know, totally cribbed.
Also a wide range of palette. You know, like he's using a lot of colors. Sometimes you think of an artist with a certain palette, but he's all over the map, which I applaud. What's so great about this is to go from all the color work into this black and white, and it almost looks like painting in monochrome.
Right.
It's incredible how many values and textures he can get in black and white. Just blows my mind.
Using the white acrylic, man, to sharpen up those shadows. And, you know, this guy, from what I understand, I think it's even maybe in the back matter of those Bunko edition Dark Horse books from back in the day. I don't think he had assistants. So he churned out the 8,000 pages himself. So when you're busting these lines out, like you're going over the holding line. So then you hit it with the white, and it's all gravy.
Here's some of your wet on wet, like an ink wash, where you can see that wet ink bleeding out.
Always fascinating to discover that when it's printed process red, it's actually painted process red, like with that exact color. How about that background texture, dude? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, we got the image and you still can't crack it.
Yeah, that has to be a screen, right? There's a couple of those things.
I don't know, man. Because, like, with screens, you could always see. I mean, I feel like some spongy kind of thing will handle that. Like, I don't see...
maybe put down the, what's that stuff you put down to do?
Frisket?
Yeah, put down Frisket to create some of these, like, openings.
Yeah, liquid Frisket, that's what it is.
And then you could do a sponge or a cloth or something to press in.
And then you get your little paper cement eraser to get the boogers off, and it's all good.
Love this stuff where you're seeing, like, that's just one brush stroke.
Yeah.
There's the white hairs and the bluish gray hairs there.
Speedy brush strokes.
But see, some of this kind of stuff, the amount of texture that he's doing, I mean, these are all drawn lines.
Yeah.
It's wild, and that may be a semi-dry brush, so you're drawing maybe a few of those lines at a time. But overall, and then the textures of stuff like this, it's gorgeous.
It's like a big dry brush. And kind of keeping that wavy momentum with all this, you know, like
so gestural.
Like, it's very, very speedy.
It is.
And we see guys like they use individual lines, but he's just allowing for some chaos and to see what happens on the page.
Yeah, you can really see like the size, I think, of the brush that's being used on some of these edge strokes. So you can see it's probably a brush that's trimmed down on the bristles, so they're pretty stiff. And you're able to get, you know, 1/4 of an inch coverage or so.
I think this is one of the Tenko bonds that Frank had.
I was going to say, there's a lot of Frank Miller there.
It looks like a canvasy paper also.
Because
like when he's hitting that, you see these like white lines coming up like that. And it suggests, you see it down here too, it suggests a textured paper. It's rare that he really uses tone.
Man, these scans are so good. I think these came from a manga museum.
Yes.
And they're just incredible for really getting color on there.
And just back and forth with Manola, like he had the opportunity to print it bigger, but he would have sacrificed page count.
Yeah. And
he wanted as many pages as he could get his hands on.
I think that's right. You know, like these images are so crisp and sharp. It's always great to see the art at full size, but the quality is so good. It's like... I'll take the page count. I agree with him. I'm happy with that.
This is fun. Sunburst, draw your guys, and then hit some white around the edges to create that rim lighting, and then using white for snow.
Yeah,
on top
white
of
splatter.
On top of your Zipatone. Using that spatter for very choppy waters.
Great
like
water.
this is a guy who fucking can sling some ink and get it to do what he wants. Like, I was like even looking at that face.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And just all
it
this,
looks like doodles.
It does, man. But I mean, it's all there, and it is that Toshiro Mifune dude, and he's got the kitchen's hairs and shit.
This would always strike me as somebody trying to draw, where it's like you've got lines that are outlines, that are heavy lines, you know, on the fingers and stuff, and then you've got like 10 million lines, like some on the fingers, on the face, but they're not lines. They're textures, they're values, they're all these other things, even though technically it's all line.
And just going with a tech pen, you know, Gerhard job right there.
It also looks very fast.
Yes.
Even though it's flawless, like, you know, all the figures, everything looks perfect. Man, I love seeing guys do water, and this water is really sharp. And there's your full moon zine, so we can represent him in that in my fantasy zine as well. But it looks like it's drawn very quick. Like, you know, he's not sitting around looking at these pages, I don't think.
No. And oh, dude, isn't that didn't Neil Adams make a Batman comic like this?
This kind of stuff too, of negative space. The lack of repetition as you go through here, and I liked seeing a crescent moon for a change. You could champion this book purely on composition, because there's all over the map in that front too.
We'll put the call out once again, dude. Here's that crazy texture again. I wonder if that is a tone. Yeah, I just don't know. We'll put maybe it is a sponge. But we'll put the call out again because there are clearly people out there who are sucking those pages off the net and making their books. 2 copies to the P.O. box in the description below this video, please. We will we'll show off your self-published comics as well.
Man, the more you look at this stuff too, is Ronin doesn't exist without this.
I mean, throwing the sword, right? Like that moment is in Ronin.
I mean, the line work, you know, that was some of my first Miller, and it blew me away. And then you see this, and you're like, ooh, interesting.
He'll get
everything comes from something.
Yeah, he'll get to pieces. Manola will get to pieces where he's zeroing in on panels. I think some of this work is in the artist edition.
We're gonna do an episode on copycat artists.
Yes.
And I wish I would have pulled Ronin to put next to this. It would have been really interesting. I mean, there's so many elements that are on that in that book.
I think you just called a amazing audible that because we didn't record that episode yet.
Yeah, and I give no shade to that, by the way.
No.
It's some of the stuff I love in comics, but you flip through this and it really is pronounced. You know, I mean, this is practically comic book size, so it is like those Ronin pages burn into my head, and then you see this. Love this kind of stuff too. We say it all the time. That kind of thing is so much harder to do than you would think.
Sure, and I mean, it's pure Hokusai. You know, it's using all the same tools.
Boy, the soupiness of the atmosphere too is phenomenal.
Just master that dry brush. He's keeping them shitty brushes, like, you know, in a stack right next to his other stuff.
This is pretty sweet to see your red and black, and the red being that saturated. We haven't seen something like that in here yet.
Straight out the bottle.
Yeah, it's like one more tool that he has in his belt to use if he's got an idea that takes advantage of it.
Getting a whole little battle sequence in there.
Yeah, getting those 2-page spreads intact.
I believe this sequence is in the big artist edition, but that's what I'm saying. Like, even if Dark Horse like shrunk down their existing artist edition or whatever they call their version to that manageable size that you could look at, you know, in bed, it doesn't touch this. This is much better because this has all of that stuff and more and like so much more.
Figuring out how to represent a field, you know, a field of wheat.
The toughest stuff, man. I remember looking like I needed straw in a
Don't
comic.
sleep on these kind of things, you know, like doing believable foliage and woods like this.
Yeah.
You know who's all great at that is Bassett.
I was thinking, I was thinking Peach.
Stuff. Yeah.
You just put that little piece of foreground stuff in there, it just adds so much freaking depth. Pen drawing some like Osamu Tezuka leaves and shit.
Yeah, they're cartoon leaves.
Yeah.
I always think of that story of Flair and Eric Bischoff getting into it in the office, and somebody was like, Flair was throwing his working punches, and I feel like that's what this stuff is. Like, that's a working leave, that's a cartoonist leave,
Right. But then he could do this kind of shit.
Yeah, to combine the two is magnificent.
The depth.
Oh,
Once
man.
again, in Just Pen, he's not relegated to needing color to create that depth. He's able to do it this way. This is a screen, and you could see the white. Like, what the white would do is if you had like low fidelity print, which this shit was very low fidelity, and you would notice it on a lot of paste up lettering in like late 80s 1990s comics. You put a chunk of white at the edges, and it smooths the edge so that you don't have a harsh line that's visible when it turns to final black and white line reproduction.
Yeah, and you talk about depth, not just this foreground, but that mountain looks like it's 3 miles back in the distance.
Yeah, you see no details on it.
Oh man, that's gorgeous.
Hitting
too.
this with some pencil, like some grease pencil or something.
I love this kind of panels where like you're seeing different drawing in the same panel, where this is almost the centerpiece.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different drawing language than the rest of that page.
Clearly on a watercolor paper, this one.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the blue lines or anything like that. You see the big
Boy, it's stunning.
texture.
You're setting sun in just red, no holding line whatsoever.
And then you paint through the character, and it just creates that haze that you would get with a camera, or I guess perhaps even your own vision if you see somebody against the sun like that.
Sometimes I forget the impact that these artist editions have. It's so inspiring. Like, I want to go home and draw so bad after looking through this.
This scene right here, at the end of every episode of Fist of the North Star, the cartoon, it's desolate, post-apocalyptic. And when it cuts to the credits, it's almost like sadism against all the characters in the show. Because it's just like a beautiful song, and it's just foliage and the most beautiful blue waters and full fields of corn and rice and all kinds of shit when these guys are killing each other for little bags of rice. It's very sadistic. I almost thought that was like dead bodies with butt cheeks.
Once again, like you're seeing all kinds of illustration technique in that one panel.
What a book. See, this is one of the things where you just zoom in. And I think it is a zoomer because like these are pretty thick lines. Like, these are getting reduced up. Several pages taped together. That's what we're getting right here. So we're getting a tapestry, 2-page spreads.
I don't know how many of these homemade artist editions we're going to get, but I love seeing the design flourishes.
Absolutely.
Like, what are people including in them?
Yeah,
because at some point I'm going to design an artist edition. Like, I have to. If I die of natural cause, I've got to do one. Even if I do a fan one. But seeing like what people think of to include, it's brilliant to see the little flourishes.
Absolutely, man. And dude, how telling is this, man? Like, when I was doing print on demand with WYSIWYG in like the aughts, you could not do full bleed. So this is you could do that. I was wondering on a lot of this earlier stuff, like, is there no opportunity to do that? Clearly there is. And he's kicking it with the black border on certain things.
I would love to know more about this. Like, I'd love to know the cost of this book because, I mean, it's full color throughout. So what does a 450-page full color book hardcover cost? Yeah,
you could price it out on these sites too, right? And then this complete section is in the final artist edition. We commented on that. Look at that, hitting that dry brush on the face and just adding all that depth.
Whoever scanned these originals did a great job because you get so many of the brush strokes are visible.
Yeah.
It's not blown out levels of just black or white. You really get to see like how he's building hair.
Right.
How he's building these masses that look like they're solid black. Like in print they'd be solid black, but you get to actually see the build in these scans. Really
what a book,
gorgeous.
Oh, and these are super cool, dude, because my buddy Takashi Okazaki, Afro Samurai fame, sent me, like, he hooked me up as a parting gift. Japan is a very gift-giving culture. When we first kicked it, he gave me some sets of stickers from the 70s, man, that they made of Lone Wolf and Cub. And these would be, some of these are on the back covers, where it would be, you have the front cover, and you just have a pure white with just like a little Daigoro. But like these are the stickers. Imagining that is probably like the very first licensing stuff that they did. And look at these, man, just with like Higgins ink.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's really great scans that he's working from.
They built in blue lines real early, I feel like, man, if these in the 70s.
It makes sense. You know, in an industry that's really speed is essential. But you know what? There are blue lines going back, like in American comics, at least to the 50s. Like those EC comics would have pre-printed boards.
Yeah, it's true. Doesn't that look printed up and just pasted? Seeing what that looks like or something?
It totally does.
These are stats. Very cool.
Yeah, excellent addition to the library.
And I imagine that we're just not at the level still where you could do end papers, because I feel like you would have, if it was possible, on like the print-on-demand service. So that's where we're at with that stuff. But a 450-page Lone Wolf and Cub artisan edition is out there. It exists. And there's probably, 5 copies of it out there.
Yeah, you do wonder, like, that's the next question, because that's where you really get into the legality. Like, to make your own, I think, is probably legal. To make some, like, if other people want this book, and everybody watching this video is going to want this book,
right?
That's where I think you get into some questionable territory, and I don't know how that works.
Yeah, me neither.
Because if you do your own work, here's the other thing, man. If you're an artist out there and you want your own artist edition, and again, I guess I'm talking to myself, you could make this and have it available, and it's like, if you want one, you order it from wherever it's on print on demand. I've seen Ken Landgraf books that way.
Sure, and it'll be comparable prices. Like it might be $100 book.
Yeah, they're not cheap, but you're making one hardcover, full color, 450-page book. Like,
right.
What price do you think it should be?
Totally, man.
Excellent
addition to the bootleg comic playlist. Excellent addition to the culture of bootleg artist editions. And hit up our PO box in the description below to send us your two copies, please, of each of your black market artist editions that you compile from heritage auction sites and comic art fans. Without further ado, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell. We'll notify you when new vids are available, and hit up our Patreon. Support the channel that way if you like, man. If you support us at the biggest level, you're watching this video being recorded at this very moment, and you are getting all the videos before anybody else. But Jimmy, tell the people what books you have out there that you're excited about, man.
Hulk Grand Design is coming out late February, and we have had reports already of it selling out at some Amazon countries. So grab that now, pre-order it, let your comic shop know you want a copy, because those are going fast. Thank you all for that. Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, and Princess of Poverty, and The Plain Janes are the rest of my books that are in print and available. Join me on patreon.com/JimRugg, where you can see lots more of my art, download out-of-print zines and minis. My most recent post on there is about my recent oil paintings. So join me there and pre-order Hulk Grand Design today.
We're soliciting the new Red Room comics for 2023. Red Room Crypto Killers issue 1 is being offered to comic shops right now. So you got to let your shop know that you want that comic, man, so they can put in that order for you. There are 2 trade paperbacks of that out in the wild as we speak. I'm serializing the Red Room comics on my own Patreon. Hip Hop Family Tree celebrating its 10-year anniversary. X-Men Grand Design is out there. And also WYSIWYG, support the books, and more videos happen. Jimmy, tell the people what else we have out there, dude.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, stickers, hats, fanny packs, and lots more at our spread shop. That link is also below the video.
Another great way to support the channel. Give them those marching orders. Will be on our way, Jim.
Make more comics.
Why don't you pop that Batman joint? We'll do that one, because I am going to, like, my Domus are not here, so I have to, like, look back there. And
man, if you'd have told me, I could have brought mine.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I thought they were there, but they just got shuffled around, I guess. They might be with the other stuff.
Oh, so I don't forget this. This is a great question for Bolland that we should start early on with. Any story elements he disagreed with Alan Moore, and how to depict stuff.
Sounds like a very pointed question.
Yeah, maybe a rough drafter knows something I don't. But it's a good question, because, like, anytime I've worked with a publisher or a writer, I'm often told, you can go off script, you can change this or that, or if you don't like this, let us know if you have some other idea. And I assume that, like, Moore seemed like he was real smart with how he worked with artists.
Yeah.
So I would think that would be out there, and I'll be curious if there's stuff that if there are things that Bolland deviated from the script.
Yeah.
If he remembers any of that.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it, because like there's like everybody that we've ever talked to that worked with him says that like, and Alan Moore puts stuff in to the script that says like, if you have a better way, by all means go do it. So
Yeah, so
that's pretty boilerplate.
want to hear what those are if he remembers any.
Lock us in first. Hit it. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Batman Through the Years, by way of Mad Magazine, is something that we're going to be taking a look at today on Cartoonist Kayfabe. But first, got to let you guys know that we have a Patreon out there. The biggest supporters of the Patreon get all of the videos before anybody else. Completely mitigates the kayfabe effect. I think that's going to happen with this video in particular. And I'm showing the comic cover to the chat room for the biggest supporters of the channel. So they're getting first dibs on eBay and Amazon for this book that we're going to be talking about today. The videos are brought to you by the books that we make. Right before you, you're looking at our bibliographies. Right now, Right now, I am soliciting the new Red Room comics to your local comic shop. Red Room Crypto Killers Issue 1 is being offered to your comic shop. Put it in your pre-orders right now. Get that stuff put on your pull list. 2 volumes of the trade paperbacks are out there. Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings. Hip Hop Family Tree 10-year anniversary. X-Men Grand Design. WYSIWYG are my books. Jimmy's going to have Hulk Grand Design. Hit #1 on Amazon thanks to you guys. It's coming out February 22nd, selling out on various Amazon platforms, Mexico, South America, other places. Plain Jane is a collection he has out in the wild from Little Brown, and Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive trade paperback is out there. So support our books. More videos can keep happening. And Jimmy, when we were putting together potential episodes for the future, I handed this off to you, the Mad Batman Spectacular from July 1997, because it is a great sample of Mad comics throughout the years. It is a showcase of Mort Drucker. It's a cool way to show Mort Drucker off from throughout the years, and it is just some of the funnest Batman comics that you could get your hands on, to be honest.
Yeah, I love that they do these various collections because all Batman, Mad, great. Who doesn't like that?
Right.
It is funny the order that they're in. You know, like you can kind of tell the
It makes
era.
sense.
It does make sense. You can tell the era of when this is being sold by what is front and center.
Yeah. The
You
Michael
know.
Keaton 1989 Batman phenomenon. People fucking cutting bat signals into the back of their heads. I had a couple of kids at school, man. The little Mighty Mites football team. They all decided to get the bat signal put into their heads. But then when you zero in even closer and you actually like go into the comic, it is totally rooted in the time that it was put together, where you have your Ed Koch mayor character, Paul Kersey, talking about how this Batman is even more right-wing than they were.
That's amazing.
And then you think about like the B-listers. Like, I like Arliss. You remember Arliss?
Yes.
That was a fun show. And he's in that movie. I forgot he was in the movie, actually. And it's like, hey, Arliss gets a caricature.
It's real funny to see stuff too, like the Batmobile, which at the time I thought was so cool, and now I look at it and it's like, what is that? Like, it's so bizarre, the design.
And they even talk about it, man. Like, why does a guy like that need a car like that? He doesn't. Toy manufacturers do.
Cutting promos right away. It's so true.
The syncopation and the rhythm of each of these strips, it all reads the same, and it's like Borscht Belt, Catskills, set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline. Every panel. I feel like it would be, you got to be tuned in to be able to write that sort of stuff, because that would exhaust me to have to come up with punchlines, 10 a page.
I'm sure they're tuned in. Like it has to happen. Legit, this to me is a great Joker.
Oh, totally.
Like regardless of, obviously we're looking at a Jack Nicholson caricature, but I feel like if that Joker showed up in a Batman comic legit, it would work.
Oh, absolutely. So much of this stuff works.
That's the impressive thing, is not just the likenesses that Drucker and all the Mad artists are able to do, but that almost stand alone on their own as designs, they work.
There are these little bits here, like that's somebody. Is that Bob Kane holding a Batman comic? But that's somebody.
It's such an incepted idea since he's standing in front of the Bob Kane building.
Totally. Totally. I don't know that these guys had very much to work with whenever they put together their movie parodies. They clearly got to see the flicks early enough, because I was grabbing Mad magazines, and they would schedule them very properly. Like it would be perfect. It would be so perfect to the point that like you get the Mad issue, maybe you don't read the parody because the movie ain't coming out for 2
Man,
weeks.
that's a good point.
So they had some access, and they hit all those beats.
Yeah, it's funny to think of Matt as like some kind of payola sellout scam of like promoting Batman.
Just press, press has to see the stuff, like there would be reviews in Entertainment Weekly the same time the Bad parody would be out. So, you got to get your press people to talk about it. Certainly in those days, pre-internet. Little paste-ups from like Dick Sprang comics, which is interesting. You get a little glimpse of a Mort Drucker, Superman in here. And he's a cartoonist with the best of them. I have that first, how those DC, like Marvel Milestone shits, the hardcover joints?
Yeah.
I have the Sergeant Rock that has Mort Drucker fucking war comics in there.
I've never seen
Sergeant
those.
Rock.
Wow.
Yeah. So he can do that shit. He just really came into his own here. Like let me insult some of the douchebaggery out there, man. When I say that, did you know Lando Calrissian was in the original Batman movie? He was Harvey Dent.
Jeez, talk about forgetting stuff. I saw this movie twice in theaters when I was a kid. I was so excited by it.
We caught it at the drive-in.
But it's been a long time since I've seen it. Yeah, these things bring back so much memory because, like, age-wise, this is exactly on the target audience.
Totally. And we jump right into the strip that started it all. Batboy and Reuben by Kurtzman and Wally Wood. And the astounding thing about this is it's in the original comic book issues of Mad before it becomes a magazine. It was in full color. It's in the 50s, early 50s, maybe 1953, 54. And it captures all of the pieces that the Adam West 1966 show would really lean on. It's all in here from the start. All the Deus Ex Machina, Bat-built bullshits for how to get out of stuff.
8-ball on Robin's breast pocket there for the big splash page.
Right.
He really is like predicting the future with this stuff.
I think that they were nervous in a small way about like playing around with treacherous territory. Like there really weren't parodies and lampoons like that being done in pop culture very much. Like Mad really started a lot of that kind of stuff. So they are in almost every couple of panels. It's that doth protesteth.
Right.
Too much kind of thing where it's like, we repeat, this is Lampoon. Yeah. Batboy with a boy. Reuben with a U. Like I said, you got your Deus Ex Machina bat belt stuff. That's, bat shark repellent. Mm-hmm. You got your goofy Batmobile bullshit. You have... Your boys got to repel and hang on buildings, but what if they're not so good at being able to do that? You got to do a couple of passes.
It's that stuff's really funny when you think of the 60s and the sideways climbing up the buildings and stuff.
I mean, that piece is even in here.
Yeah, it's really funny. This is a really nice reproduction too. I was looking at this online in color, and the printing of those old comics, it's so kind of busted up in garbage paper, so you really get to see Wood's artwork well here.
I wonder if they very slightly stretch the artwork, because it feels square, does it not? It feels like it's the proportion. It fits the proportions of the magazine like everything else.
It fits really well. I'd have to measure it to see that. Golden Age comics a little bit wider than what we're used to, so that might have helped. And if you look, the margins on top and bottom are small here, so I don't know. The lettering doesn't look stretched, but if you just stretched it a few percent, it might not show up.
That's right. And the great punchline to it all is that Batboy is a vampire Batboy. But dude, even the sound effect stuff, right? That's something that the Adam West show
very true.
Obviously leans on in a big way whenever they have their fight sequences and things.
It's so weird to think of this as a predecessor. Yeah, you're right.
They hit it all.
Love it. Sergio Aragonis, one of my favorite interviews we've ever done, Ed. Everybody, if you haven't watched that and you want to feel good about comics, go watch it.
Absolutely.
But love this stuff. What a funny cartoonist.
So good. And you just have to be, once again, dialed into that kind of thought process, because Sergio was, not only was he doing this feature, sometimes maybe two of them in an issue, but there's the marginalia that he would also do. Such
a quick wit. The one criticism I have is I wish that the credits were more pronounced in here, because that Kurtzman comic, Kurtzman's name's nowhere.
No, and it's never done. It's you got your main guys and then the usual gang of idiots. It's how it is, Yeah, it's so funny reading this because I was there for all of it, and I remember these comics. Mort Drucker has been fucking drawing Mad magazine stories since like maybe the 50s. We have every issue in the other room. Like we could find out when he shows up. So in the 90s, he's an old dude already drawing this shit. And as a kid, I remember so often when I would read like a Mad parody or something that like the guys who drew it, they obviously didn't know like certain references, and they didn't know certain actors. Like they had no importance to the artist. So like this is the parents of Oswald Cobblepot, fucking the Penguin, and the guy that plays the dad is Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman. But like that's not him. That's just a standing guy because Mort Drucker's watching the flick and ain't even paying attention. But that could have been a great opportunity to put Pee Wee right there or something. And I remember like when I would read these things, I'm like, oh, these old guys, they're out of touch. They just don't get it.
Do you know how like a comic like this works? Like, is a script generated before the artwork?
That's a good question. I mean, it must be.
It seems shocking in a way, but yeah, I don't know. Like, it's so hard to imagine writing this script without seeing the artwork.
Here's the other thing too. Like I bet you it is, and I bet you it's pasted up, and that's the boards that Drucker gets.
Oh yeah, you know what? That'd be the old school. That'd be like just from the original ECs. That would have been probably.
Yeah.
Wow.
But like Drucker would do several features an issue sometimes, so that guy had to draw with some speed.
Definitely, which is remarkable because he draws everything.
He does, man. Real great. I was looking at like his tires are fucking exquisite.
This feels like almost Will Eisner references. Something about those pillars and the signage just really reminds me of Eisner.
And then you got to get the timely pieces in there. Little Stimpy cat.
Yeah, we saw the turtles on the previous page, and now you're seeing Stimpy.
You know, the other thing is, like, I don't know that that Drucker was up on Christopher Walken too much. Because this dude is kind of generic. You know? And like, if he was going full...
Yeah, I wonder when Walken becomes Walken.
It's weird because he's had such a career. Like even like those prophecy movies, I feel like were out.
Oh yeah, he's had
Dare
that
Hunter
great career, but he became Christopher Walken at some point. You know, almost like the icon that everybody does an impression of.
Right.
And I wonder when that happens.
Yeah, because see, it just doesn't hit. Like it's some old dude with white hair, but he looks like him sometimes.
Some of this kind of stuff I find really strong drawing, almost like, I don't know, throwaway gags, lesser characters. Sometimes that stuff really jumps out as being, you see what a great cartoonist he is when a throwaway piece.
You get to see his real hand. What his real hand is when he's not just doing caricaturization. This is such a disturbing panel, man, where it's just like all the most like kind of famous cartoon kids in a kind of a bondage.
This had to be fun.
Yeah. And that was some of my favorite stuff in Mad Magazine was like when they would get Angelo Torres to do kayfabe strips. Look at that reflection, that water texture. So good.
That's the thing. Like his ability to draw everything is probably not something we all think of first with him. But man, that's part of how you get multiple features an issue for decades.
Get a Paul Coker Jr. joint on the ones and twos, man. He's a favorite to a lot of people. He brought that classy like New Yorker gag hand to Mad Magazine.
It feels like stylistically he'd be one of the last guys that really had that skill set. You know, sure. I think that was something when you see like how to do comics throughout the years, that's a piece that's sold for decades. But this early 90s, I guess, not very many people practicing that, especially at that level.
And at the time, topically, like when it was mentioned that George Clooney was going to be Batman, like everybody dismissed it. But the thing is, it had to fall on deaf ears to a certain extent because it was Mr. Mom who played fucking Batman in the first two, and everybody's Seriously? Like, Michael Keaton, are you fucking joking? I had no context for it. Like, I didn't give a fuck about Mr. Mom. In fact, Mr. Mom was propelled by Batman to me, and I'm like, oh, I gotta see him in this, you know? Batman was my first Michael Keaton, I would say. So I had none of those prejudices, but Clooney was getting a lot of it. And, you know, it took Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino to, like, take the fucking ER scrubs off of that dude and turn him into a big-time actor. This guy, Duck Edwing, he would be ubiquitous. Had a real, like, I always thought of his stuff as, like, good, like, daily strip type cartooning style. And then you look at this piece and it's like, is that Doug Edwing or is that Sergio? Now this is sexy
wild
stuff.
This could have been rolled right into DC Comics. Maybe minus Calvin,
Right.
as Robin, but really slick. Like, it's such a good marriage of style. You know, it lends itself perfectly to this treatment.
Yeah. Yeah, he just pushed the jaw a little touch, man. But like even the proportions are pretty close.
That clean line work is kind of nice.
You know something that would be a great like side business for these guys too is the subjects by that artwork. Howard Stern owns a bunch of like paintings and shit like that, all throughout like comics. Period. Matt Bors, when he was doing Idiot Box and doing political editorial strips. These Republican dudes would fucking buy his. They would get a kick out of like Matt Bors drawing them in bondage domination gear and have those images framed.
It feels ludicrous.
I would like to think that Matt would double the charge for any douchebags or whatever. But
that's a tip for everybody, by the way, that's selling your artwork. Double whatever you think it's worth.
Now this is a cool piece, man, because we just looked at a lot of basically contemporary Mort Drucker. You know, this magazine gets compiled in 1997. You know, you have Batman 89, like 91, 93, something like that. We're going back to 66, man. We're going to the Adam West TV show, and you're getting to see what his style looked like then. Like in my lifetime, Mort Drucker to me always looked the same. It's like very reliable. This is a different approach. I think it's using some duotone.
I love this stuff. It's the part that we mentioned at the top of the show that it's not the stories aren't reprinted chronologically,
right?
But it's such a treat to get to this story and get to see this flashback, and it's beautiful. Like the Batman television pieces that are folded in, like those sound effects, they look so good here.
Yeah, for sure. He's got a looser style, more sketchy line work. Mm-hmm. You know, very interesting here. Like a modern day Mort Drucker wouldn't do it. I don't think he had the tools that he had. Available in terms of print technologies, because like these beautiful washes and shit, they weren't doing that. Like you don't see that. So he had duotone. He had to use different materials at the time, or maybe that's just where his head was at that moment.
And it's interesting to see like the promos that are cut on the Batman TV show feel like I'm a fan of the Batman TV show a lot. Uh-huh. But I feel like there's definitely like Neil Adams. There's like a kickback against it, right?
The real fan, like the real comic book fans, you know, had this conversation with a lot of dudes who from that period, man, and they were fucking insulted.
Yes,
because it's like you're laughing at we take this shit serious, and you're stepping our comics back a million years.
It feels like that's the point of view or the tone of this story. Like this would be a bunch of real comic book people complaining about what the TV show is like.
Look at that right there. Like that's probably like straight up on set.
Amazing.
The
guy laying on his side with the camera,
exactly,
hilarious.
Exactly. Me and my kid brother, we would like, we had no concept that was the deal, sure. And we thought that those dudes were fucking repelling and that it worked and stuff. It was on the Family Channel when we were kids, right before Rin Tin Tin Canine Cop. And me and my brother, we tried to do it, try as we may, man. We just could not look as graceful as they did.
I love like Alfred is the figure here. You know, just these two skinny legs standing together. It's all just a black silhouette of his whole shape. It's foundational cartooning though. Yeah. It's the shapes. You know, it's that thing of like, I don't know that that's in How to Draw Comics the Marvel way, but at some point I think you realize, oh yeah, it's just shapes.
Right. And you know, the punchline to this is merchandising.
Of course. Absolutely.
When I got to this page, I was like, okay, Jackie Mason, Boy George, Joe Piscopo, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. He looks familiar. I don't know who that is, but it's Bob Guccione.
Of Penthouse fame.
Penthouse fame. Jackie Mason as the caterer.
I actually like this art a lot. This isn't an artist that I'm familiar with, but I really like, and some of it especially, like that Robin head to me, fantastic.
Yeah, really sharp. We should call that out. The artwork is by Rick Tolka.
Do you know that name?
I actually do. He takes over Cracked.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I like the work a lot here, so somebody I'll keep an eye out for going forward.
Yes. Boy George's crossdresser. Bob Guccione as a sleaze bag.
I'll tell you what, the Mad stuff, very on PC historically. You know what I mean? If you were to go through Mad history, like you'd find a lot of stuff where it's like, oh boy, maybe we can't reprint that, or There's stuff in this issue too.
Oh, that's for sure, man.
That crosses
that first Batman joint.
Yes.
Talk about the aesthetics of that costume.
Yes.
Go back and check that out, man. Freeze on that screen. Joe Piscopo is the irritant. This is that era, like, you know, years before this. Keenan Ivory Wayans was good friends with Eddie Murphy, and you know Joe Piscopo was on SNL with Eddie Murphy, and whenever he would do promo, he would just be talking about like my buddy Eddie Murphy, blah blah blah, blah like all this time, and like that's how they would parody him on In Living Color, is just like, oh yeah, my pal Eddie Murphy, blah 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 blah.
Hard to argue with that. If I could at all say my pal Eddie Murphy, I'd be dropping that a lot.
And Andy Rooney was catching a lot of flack at this time also, because he was at his most salty on, like, what was that, 60 Minutes or one of those like late night.
That's gonna be us one day. Like at some point, you just become the parody of yourself.
Why is it they call it taking a dump and not leaving a dump? You're not taking it anywhere.
Hey, we haven't mentioned it at all. Do you like the typeset lettering?
I just accepted it.
Yeah.
You know, like, certainly, like, look at the amount of text required to get some of these jokes across. In hand lettering terms, you couldn't do it. It would be, you know, that Ivan Brunetti page from Schizo amount of... I just accepted it, you know? Like, it was what it was.
I like it better sometimes than whenever it's like the faux hand lettering, but it's digital. It's some font that stands out. Like, yeah. I have no problem with this kind of lettering. It
feels like magazine-y. It feels like, you know, it's the way magazines were. It's really kicking me in the balls right now that, like, my magazine, like, I got this off the rack and it's so yellow and looks so old that, like, the Mad magazines that I bought at flea markets and shit like that, like I got this thing brand new.
Yeah, everybody that loves newsprint, man, this is real newsprint.
The Val Kilmer, Chris O'Donnell, Nicole Kidman Batman. Kiss from a motherfucking rose. What an era.
Yeah, it's funny to see it immortalized here. It's amazing to think of what the...
Going full Schumacher. Doing exactly what Joel Schumacher wanted.
Hilarious.
And you know what? Foretelling the future of DC Comics, man.
I'll tell you this. I think the Schumacher version has a lot more in common with the Chris Nolan Batmans than people want to acknowledge.
You should expand on that thesis at a later date on the channel, Jimmy, because I would love to hear your thoughts on that. There's
some visual splendor that the two have in common.
We finish off with a little bit of Uma Thurman Batman outtakes with the Bane character. Was he in that? I guess he was in that first movie. Like, there was like a little skinny dude and they give him the juice and he gets big. I don't know if they call him Bane. Anyhow, there it is, man. Celebrating Mort Drucker and the Batman parodies of yore in Mad Magazine. I'm good to go if you're good to go, Jimmy. Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell. We'll notify you when new vids are available. And we have a Patreon where you can support the channel. Various levels of support are available there. And if you choose the biggest level, you are watching this video stream right at this moment. I'm showing you the cover of the comic as we speak, and there are people buying that thing off of Amazon and eBay right this very moment. The videos are also brought to you by the books that we make. So, Jimmy, tell the people what you have on the horizon.
Hulk Grand Design coming in February. Pre-order that. Reserve your copy today before those things are sold out, because it is selling well right now, and it's not even out yet. Thank you all for that. But do pre-order or reserve a copy if you want it. Street Angel, Deadly Squirrel Alive, and Princess of Poverty coming soon, and the Plain Janes also available. You can join me on patreon.com/JimRugg, where you can see more of my comics and art, what I'm working on. You can download out-of-print zines and mini comics, and you can see my painting experiments from last week. Big post on all of those.
Red Room Crypto Killers issue number 1 is being solicited to your comic shops at this very moment. Murder on the Dark Web for Fun and Profit is the name of the game. There are 2 existing trade paperbacks out there, all stories self-contained. If you see an issue, scoop an issue up. Give it a shot. Hit up my Patreon. I'm serializing the new Red Room comics before they hit paper at the Patreon. And Tip-Off Family Tree, 10-year anniversary, X-Men Grand Design. Bunch of books out there for you to chew on. Hit up my link tree in the description below. You can get all this material. Jimmy, tell the people what else is out there.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, stickers, fanny packs, hats, mugs, and lots more at our spread shop. That link is also below this video.
Another great way to support the channel, man. Given those marching orders, will be on our way.
Read more comics.
I'll just keep going. And
yeah, man, you got a green battery.
I'm gonna... That's That doesn't count.
No?
No, it's fucked up. like we pay for that shit and it's no good. But I'm gonna call an audible just because I don't see my dough moves right away.
Boo.
It'll be fine.
Don't make us do an episode where we just read Domu to ourselves. We should twist that camera before we hang up and show everybody the pile of boxes of comics that we have to go through.
Yeah, it's amazing, man.
Whew. Ed, I'm going to need another storage unit.
I know what you mean.
I was thinking about, we've talked a lot about like our collections and, you know, you end up becoming a collector almost accidentally.
Right.
But at some point, like, for real, like I have a collection that is about maybe 4 rooms worth at this point, 5 rooms worth.
Yeah, like...
I don't know, man. People at home, what do you do with giant collections of comics? Like, how do you organize? And I hate thinning because whenever I thin stuff, then it's like in my head, it's like Phantom Limb.
Right.
Where I'm like, oh, I have this. And it's like, nope, you don't.
There will be no thinning.
Well, what are you pulling out? I have a couple of those volumes.
No, we're going to do Kaaba. We're going to do Kaaba 2, and the video is going to be called "Is Kaaba 2 worth it? Worth the price tag?" Like, it's a video I've been wanting to do. I just got to look for those fucking domus, man.
Well, if we plan ahead, I can bring mine.
Yeah, it'll be next week or something. But, like, this is a video I've been wanting to do. This is a sexy comic that,
I'm eager to see it. I haven't seen this book.
yeah.
Gosh. I don't know if I've ever seen this book in person.
Very expensive, man. Very expensive here in the States, and I had that funny money from doing Tokyo Comic Con, so I just said, fuck it. What happened?
Zero asks, who has the bigger collection, you or me?
Yeah, I don't even know.
I have no idea, but man, I'll tell you, we'd have one of the biggest comic book stores probably I've ever been in if we put them together.
Yeah.
You probably have more. You probably have more comics than me. Like just looking at boxes. Although, I mean, even that now is in multiple rooms.
You know what else is out of control is inventory that I have. I have 500 copies of every Hip Hop Family Tree issue, so I got at least 400 of each of them.
Yeah.
Still, 12 issues of that.
It's
So
nice to have those, but that it does pile up.
it's about 12 boxes. I keep those in the closet in there. Eric Reynolds hit me up. He's like, "You got 2 copies of 12 that I could get?" And I was like, "I do, but it's box 12 at the bottom of the big stack. Like I just ain't going in there right now. Like it's a fucking hassle." So what I'm gonna call this video will be is Kaaba 2 worth it? Worth owning, and to my taste, isn't that beautiful?
It's a great cover.
Just feel all of it, like even the
I can see. I have such a good angle for
Yeah.
seeing the spot varnish, the embossing.
what I was gonna say. My thesis at the end of the day is if you have Ganga, that's plenty. A lot of that stuff is in here at maybe a better level.
I'm excited to look through it for sure.
Yeah, that would just be kind of.
He's another one of these guys, like from an illustration standpoint. It's again, at some point we got to do the cards, Ed.
Right. I wonder if this could work. That looks fine, right?
Highlight the skill sets that are possible in cartoonists.
Yeah.
You know what, man? That'd be a fun item to have, like a 4-card page in the back of our book.
Yeah.
With like cards, you know,
Yeah.
it'd be front, and then you flip the page and you have your stats.
Listen, man. We shouldn't say much because we're recording.
Yeah.
Lock me in. All right, I'm good if you are. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
One of the books that definitely has been kayfabe affected to death, and the last remaining copies are going to disappear. Kaaba 2, or Katsuhiro Otomo. We're going to talk about that today. But got to let you guys know we have a Patreon out there for our biggest supporters. You're watching us stream this recording as we are doing it in real time, completely mitigating that kayfabe effect. And at the end of the day, they're going to have access to all the videos before anybody else. So support our channel that way if you like. If not, the videos are brought to you by the books that we make. Before you is the bibliography that we have out in the wild as we speak. I'm soliciting the next round of Red Room Comics, Crypto Killers Issue 1, to your comic shops now. So let your store know that you want it. Pre-order that stuff. There are 2 existing trade paperbacks of Red Room out there. We're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree. X-Men Grand Design is out in the wild, and WYSIWYG. Jimmy has a forthcoming Hulk Grand Design trade paperback coming out at the end of February 2023. Get your hands on that. Put it in your pre-orders. It is disappearing from the Amazon warehouses in other countries. So it is looking like that is going to be a quick sellout. Plain Janes is Jimmy's shoujo manga. And Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive trade paperback is back in print, collecting all of his Image Comics material from Street Angel series. Without further ado, Jimmy, here's the question, man. Kaaba 2, is it worth it? We'll let you guys at home decide if that's worth it to you, because this is a pretty rare and expensive book at this point, man. Everybody who wanted this book got their hands on it, and they're not letting go. And if they are, it's going to cost you a premium. But I was out there in Japan. I participated in Tokyo Comic Con and sold some stuff, lots of prints, and had Chuck E. Cheese money. You know what I mean? Nothing I could use back here in the States, and yen was cheap when we were out there. No tourism happened and all that stuff. So I just allocated some of those funds to getting this book that I always wanted. Had no idea what was in here. And we'll crack it open.
It's a beautiful cover.
Oh yeah, you got spot gloss, you got debossing, you have embossing.
It's so neat. Whenever you do like a little bit of open, I can see it on the monitor as the spot varnish hits the light.
Yeah.
And it almost shimmers across there.
Yeah, and it's all the right stuff. It's the zipper, it's all the buttons.
Yeah, very pretty.
You know, but he didn't do it on the logo. Like, he's a very he's just a powerful illustrator. We did a video on Kaaba, the first one, ahead of time. I like this piece right here, a little self-portrait from behind, dude, in a hotel room. Has all of his stuff laid out. 2007, I think this might be that time when he participated in drawing that Italian bicycle race thing.
Yeah, it's a shame these things are so hard to get your hands on.
Yeah.
I said it before we started. This is the first time that I've seen this
in
person. So it's very cool. And as you say, the books themselves are beautiful.
Great big giant art, Akira. We see like a lot of this stuff over time. I've never seen this piece before.
Stunning reproduction too. And
it's the 30th anniversary, so it was presumably made around this time, 30 years after, you know, making the initial anime. Like, his whole style and sensibility has changed. You see these buttons, and then it makes you wonder, like, is that Kaneo there on the cover? Steam Boy. It's interesting, his career, because like we did that video on Cyberpunk not too long ago. So Akira, Cyberpunk staple, but then he went steampunk with Steam Boy, you know, playing with all the stuff. I'd like to see his splatterpunk efforts. Like, what would that look like?
I would love that.
A lot of Steam Boy work.
It makes sense.
Tried watching it a couple of times, and I want to give it another go, but I could not fucking sit through it for all of its beauty.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never seen it. But I do remember it making quite a bit of noise.
Back in the days of, like, I probably even rented it on VHS tape.
What is this illustration of?
Yeah, it's
is it a collage?
It's for memories. And you know what? I think it actually is. Because I know this piece. It's... No, fuck. I think it's one piece.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. He'll do that. He'll layer various images that he's done over... Because he's good at iconography, creating, like, an unforgettable drawing. And then he will create these collages and kind of do retoolings of his existing artworks. You know, he's drawn this a million times. Magnetic Rose. The Memories book that Epic put out tells the story of the Magnetic Rose story that was in the anime. And the cool thing about the anime, if you remember the comic, which we did a video of, this will go up in our Katsuhiro Otomo playlist, when the guys are in a spaceship and they're talking, every panel, the orientation of the astronaut is upside down, you know, perpendicular, and they capture that in the anime. Like, I think it's a very cool thing. Wow, the spread for the memories book, which would be about here, but then it would be French flaps and stuff. So there'd be back cover, French flaps on either side, so you're getting the full tapestry. And I actually don't think you get all of it.
No way, man. This has to be cut off some.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like I don't ever remember seeing this. So it's like you're getting this much.
Well, you know what? You know when you would get this is if you're doing the traditional Japanese orientation, where this is what we would think of as a back cover.
Right.
And this would be our, you know, our front cover, their back. Then it would all fit.
Right. Oh, that cover for SOS. This is such a great cover, man. And this is a way to goose your Instagram. Like if you want to tickle the algorithm. Because like I'll post this because this is a front cover, back cover, French flaps. So it's like you see this image, a resting image on the front. The back cover is a zoomed out view. Inside French flap of the front is the boys looking down. And then the inside of the flap on the back cover is the dudes descending into subterranean.
I think we could do an episode on this spread because you have kind of a static image, right?
Yeah.
Except it's not static because of these diagonal lines in both of these images. You know, figuring out a way to make dudes standing around doing nothing interesting and dynamic. And then you have like this repeating motif of our circle, right? Whether it's the manhole cover, the flashlight, or the light that's coming down behind them.
Yeah. And then
what a designer.
Just for this piece, we could talk color all day.
Yeah.
With your muted hues of the background and your very poppy colors on your main focal points.
Interesting his ability to draw old people.
Sure. I have this. It's an album cover.
That makes sense. Fits that square page perfectly.
It's a close up of the head. You don't get none of this. It's.
That's interesting too, because you can imagine creating this with like, oh, you could put the logo here, or you could put tracks, or you know whatever other info. Classic Mobius homage.
Maybe the third time we saw this piece on the video so far.
I hope I see it another 100.
Talk about magnetic rose, man. Very much influenced by Stanley Kubrick. There's a little portrait piece, but let's do Jim Cameron as well. You know, with all the technology that Cameron, you know, that stationary camera thing. I forget what that thing's called.
I wonder what that was for, and then. Does Cameron own that? Because you talk about artists doing like certain people as their subject matter, and then those people want to own that piece.
Yeah.
Man, if Otomo draws you, how do you not try to do everything you can to have that in your collection?
Totally. And then like Katsuhiro, are we just showing off now?
That's too much. Too much.
There's one for your full moon zine.
I'll say that's a cover image.
Playing with digital.
Yeah.
So he's got, it's probably full digital color also, which is very rare. You never see that with Katsuhiro Otomo. He's so deft at the practical aspect. But Jimmy, you could probably attest, you just did some painting recently. Clean up some motherfucker, is it not?
It's definitely, I think, a lengthier process.
Yeah.
It makes sense, though, him doing multimedia, playing with multimedia, because we see that even in his early part of his career.
True. I got this. Somebody gifted me the magazine that this turns up in, a cover of Brutus magazine, which when I was out there, Brutus, I think it's a weekly, monthly magazine. I was looking at an issue and they covered the Sabrina cartoonist, Nick Dernasso, and Chris
like
Ware.
Yeah,
they did pieces on those dudes. But it was before that war comic that we got. It was the last, the newest Otomo comic from 2007.
That's interesting. A Nemo strip.
Yeah, I don't know.
I never saw that before.
Coconino Pressman, the people that did those like oversized like Zach Sally, Kevin Huizenga comics. So, not sure what that's about.
Yeah, it must. Yeah, I don't know. That's beautiful.
So cool, man. Creating that sepia tone that's associated with old film.
Man, brilliant. And throwing your astronaut in the middle front.
Yeah.
Oh.
Straight up
What
Wright
a
Brothers
genius.
plane. Inventing the Oculus, I feel like.
Making his pitch for Kaaba to be part of our cyberpunk list.
Right.
There's so many of his illustrations where I think, like, if I came up with that, I'd be so satisfied with myself.
Oh, I know. Like, he's just that guy, you know? This is so sick, dude, because it's like, is it different drawings? Like, is he just, like, doing different color samples. It's trying to figure out like the palette. You know, if this is the last, you know, the final choice. Like, are these the tryouts?
Man, I don't know what it is, but I love it. And these are like your shoulder pieces. You know, like this little piece all in different patterns. Like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like paper dolls by a master illustrator.
One of those pieces where it's like, it would be nice to be able to read this. So
Yeah.
good at these bikes, man. And like, so smart too. It's like static, you get to see the spokes. Close up, you get to see the spokes. Speed? Nah, dude. You don't see the spokes.
Even the detail to like the cycling shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, he just zones in, man.
It feels like there's a certain mental, I don't want to say preoccupation, but a wiring.
Yeah.
You know, that has this kind of obsession with the details and the pieces that fit together. And it reminds me of Jeff Darrow when he talks about like making, you know, his drawings. It's an understanding of what the thing is.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, that's what the clear line forces you into. You know, like when Jeff is saying stuff like, well, I don't use black and I don't use shadow because I drew the thing. It's almost like I'm proving that I know how to draw the thing. You know, I don't want to cheat and you know, use the McFarlane philosophy of when in doubt, black it out. It's like, no, figure it out. Using several, like, there's pencil in this. And in fact, it's all pencil. Like, these outer lines are definitely pencil.
That would always blow my mind whenever it goes from pencil and then you see like, I mean, it's such a beautiful, lush, full color illustration. And to think that it's pencil line. I mean, look, I've been drawing in pencil when it comes to color work because I do think the color connects to the pencil easier.
You ever see the video, and I don't know if it's like just digitally manipulated CGI type shit, but like it's this these bike dudes will get full Superman and like lean their legs out, so like almost have the seat like on their tummy, like pelvis area, and just fucking become so aerodynamic, going
I've never seen that.
ridiculously quick. I think it was a move that's like now outlawed, like in these like big races and stuff like that. But like these dudes just do a full Superman and like it doesn't look like the wheels can sustain.
Feels like when it goes wrong, you die.
You're getting really jacked up. You're getting jacked up real bad for sure if it happens. Like I don't want to see that.
Brilliant, the art director that hires him to do this, to cover a race like that. Wow.
Yeah.
Stroke of genius.
Yeah.
I have a Ken Landgraf bike comic. It's a little different. He does some cool stuff. Like whenever we talk about writing in comics, and sometimes your captions will be somehow different or change the illustration.
Right.
I feel like he does that in some of his drawings where it's like it's a sound drawing and then there's color put on top of it that's almost a different communication.
Dude, this is so cool. It's a self-portrait, and it's that humble desk where it's just like lapboard. You know, we've seen him working at his stuff. It's clearly storyboard paper where he's drawing stuff. But then there's like those SOS characters. Just like, is that like a whammy pedal, like a guitar pedal?
It kind of looks cyberpunk. Got wires and stuff hanging out. Love all those little characters walking around.
Going Lord of the Rings. How sweet is this stuff, Jim?
Yeah, as an animal lover, I gotta sign off on this. Even his simple drawings are very exceptional.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these are bumped up levels for pencils.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this stuff looks like.
Yeah, I think that was part of the digital revolution. Maybe it comes a little bit from animation too, but it definitely seems like a lot, because a lot of the Hewlett stuff would go that direction.
Check this out, man. It's his Batman black and white with some color built onto it, and it's like, I don't know if he's doing the color, but somebody's trying out some digital, and its bleeding edge doesn't work so well.
Yeah, you can see like the word balloons too put on top of the art where they're translucent.
Yeah, and you just see like, you know, he didn't bump up the pixel count on the color and has that halo, the banding, whatever you call that, flare.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, why do this? Must have appeared somewhere.
Yeah,
somewhere in English. Wow, look at that digital, early digital effect in digital coloring.
Yeah, it really kind of brutalizes the work. You know, check out the Batman black and white. That's the real sexy stuff. I always liked his thoughtful, like, what would a bat signal look like against a really soupy sky? You know, that's really pretty freaking
cool. And our Faustian.
Say it again.
The most Faustian Batman Otomo drawing.
Yes, sir.
I like the pin motif for like your chapters.
Right.
You know, animations.
Yeah. Very thoughtful designer. You know, he thinks about these whole packages. Looks like more animation pitch stuff. You see this stuff, and you could see that he would be buds with Mobius.
Yeah.
In fact, Jeff Darrow said several times on the channel that, like, at Mobius's bedside when he passed away was this book, Kaaba 2.
I did not. Yeah, that's interesting to know. Glad to hear that on this video.
More pencil work, man. Just seeing him build these fucking crazy vehicles.
When you see this kind of pencils, do you think this is a light box from a rough...
Or something. Like there's some bump up, because you can't just do that.
It's too clean and too complex, right?
You just can't do that. You can't.
No.
I don't want to hear it.
And even if he can, right. I don't want to know about it. Let me have it.
Because you know what?
That this is a refined drawing.
Because you know what, man? Like I've seen Brendan Graham draw. And he could do stuff like that just as straight ink, you know? Like, there are guys that could just... It's just a different level of thinking, man.
It is true. I think Mobius has talked about, too, like, that technique of visualizing it, you know, very clearly before you go down.
Yeah, and I don't think that's kayfabe for some dudes. Like, certainly Kim Jong-gi comes to mind with some of the stuff we looked at, and he's a guy. Like, there was no, like, underdrawing on those pages.
Yeah, you know what? I wonder if he worked that way, though, of having it visualized, or if it was almost improv on the page. Because I think there's a group that does that, too. Yeah. There's so many different ways brains work when it comes to this. Or, I guess, to anything, but...
And it's almost just different ways of saying the same shit.
I'll tell you one thing I'll take away from a book like this.
Yeah.
The attention to backgrounds.
Sure.
Like, I never just sit around and draw backgrounds, and I should.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of lessons.
It's a character, right?
It is, man. And they talk about, you know, you can tell a lot by a person, like, what chairs they have.
Love this stuff. Yeah, the storyboard stuff's so cool.
Gundam came up in conversation a lot when I was in Japan as being a major influence on a lot of people out there, man. Takashi, Yo, who's Peach's partner, Aki, the translator. Like, Gundam is gigantic. Very important to a lot of people. You know, we only just started getting that stuff within the past 25, 30 years. But since the 70s, like, it just, like, had such an imprint. And the guy who did that comic that's translated to English, the Gundam The Origins, like, that's the dude, that's the OG guy, like, came back and, like, made an origin comic. The guy who designed original mechas and all that. And he's the dude that's the big influence on all that. It's not, like, really just Gundam at whole, it's, like, that guy. So
interesting.
Gundam The Origin is a comic that you should scoop up sooner than later. Just great at designing these, like, these characters, you know. It's his SOS guys, the guys that we saw looking down that manhole, probably like an early attempt or something.
See, that's very Hewlett-esque to me.
Sure.
And it's that ability, as you say, it's character design.
Yeah.
That would go in our matrix of cartoonist skills, you know, that ability to do great character design. And you do see it on a page like that, where it is like all different shapes, all different heights. You know, it's you'd recognize any of those characters by silhouette.
Right.
Wow. Again, with these backgrounds, just unreal. That was like a layers, right? Like,
yeah.
Like going from subterranean to up into the air.
Right.
Makes me think of when we looked at steampunk.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where it's like you're coming from underground, the underworld people, and it's so disappointing, once again, compared to something like this.
Steampunk, the Chris Pachalo comic. Not to be confused with Steam Boy, the Katsuhiro Otomo anime. Right.
Real interesting choice with that red for a lot of these elements in this story.
Yeah, like all the machinery.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't expect that to work, and it looks great. Especially for like a gun, a cannon.
And then, of course, that's a subterranean. That's hell, you know? So, like, when you hit the terrestrial, it's
that's
blues.
Right. Exactly. And this is an explosion, right? Like smoke and an explosion. It just looks like paint on a canvas.
It does, yeah. Just the way he arranged it and smeared it around. Got to do what he wanted. I got this book like Memory of Memories about the anime, and there's a good sample of Otomo stuff, but it's everybody who had their hand in it. I got to just think of how to phrase it to make a good video out of it. But that's an accessible book that you can get for $20-$30.
I don't think I've seen that.
That will not, Otomo appreciates. Like, it's not all Otomo, but those books appreciate rather than go down, which is another reason why, like, I'm never going to get Kaaba 2 as cheap as I got it. It only goes up.
I mentioned earlier how he'll have these drawings that are part drawing, and then like the color's almost a different thing. That's a really good example where like the top half of that, clearly it's this character, but as you go down, it becomes just this whole different scene.
Look at him in a studio with like 15 different canvases or something?
This is great. This is your classic animation. I forget what that's called, but it's basically
like a pan
like
shot.
Panning up a building, having the perspective built into like round.
Yeah. So like, like your fisheye, it's right here, and then it descends. See, so it's like the midpoint.
Yep.
It's a descent this way and a descent that way. Good fucking luck. And then you paint that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous because it looks like you're moving a camera, except your camera is like the same distance, and it's just the image moving, but it gives the effect of like you're spinning your camera up and down.
Yeah, I mean your panorama on your phone does that, but these guys ain't playing with digital. That was a practical piece of artwork. Look at this.
There's also an abundance of this stuff. Like these little kind of like, I don't want to say throwaway sketches, but you know what I mean? Like there's so many of these drawings that are just like thousands of pieces of tiny drawings. Yeah. Like, is he saving all this stuff? Is it all cataloged in his... This looks like an answer to that question.
That's like my back room.
But I mean, is it like, does he have apartments full of this stuff?
Yeah.
There's so much work, so prolific it seems.
Look at that studio, dude. That looks like conducive to creativity right there, my man.
Yeah, and that looks like you're working on some bike stuff, so you got to have some real reference.
And I think it's just his life, like walking culture, biking culture, big time out there.
Yeah.
So there it is, people, man. Kaaba 2, is it worth it? You decide yourself. If you had just a finite amount of cash on hand, right? Like, and you have to make a choice. You got $150. Do you get Genga? Do you get Kaaba 2? For my money, I would say get Genga. You get to see it's more artist edition like. You get to see more of the process that way, which speaks to me personally. This is more finished looking material, but that's a decision you have to make, because I don't have to make that decision. It's got both.
It's Sophie's choice of Otomo.
Right. Yeah, because they're both at comparable prices in a way. Kaaba 2 costs a little bit more. So make your decisions, man. And the King Kayfabers who are out there have made those decisions before you get to see the video, because they supported the channel early on the Patreon, and they're watching us stream this video as we speak. But Jimmy, let the people know what else is out there, and we'll get the show on the road.
Hulk Grand Design coming to your local comic shop in February. Pre-order or reserve your copy today is my tip for everyone, because man, it exploded on Amazon recently, so those copies are going quickly even before it's out on the street. You can also pick up Street Angel.
Yeah. Say what's on your mind, Jimmy.
Hulk Grand Design coming to comic shops in February. I recommend that you pre-order that or reserve that with your local comic shop, because it recently blew up on Amazon, so those copies are going before it's even out on the streets and available for sale. So make sure you reserve that copy now. Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, and Princess of Poverty, and the Plain Janes also available from me. You can also join my patreon.com/JimRugg to see a lot more of my comics and artwork. You can download out-of-print zines and mini comics, and my latest post is recent painting exhibition that you can only see on my Patreon.
We're soliciting the next round of Red Room comics for 2023 to your local comic shops right now. Red Room Crypto Killers issue number 1 is being offered at the moment, so get that put on your pull list. Go tell your comic shops that you are interested, and get those orders on reserve. We're going to be putting it out on a monthly basis once the train starts rolling. 2 trade paperbacks of Red Room out there right now: Trigger Warnings and The Antisocial Network. You can get those at finer comic shops or Amazon, eBay, wherever. I'm serializing the new Red Room stuff on my Patreon as we speak. More than 300 pages up there for the price of $3. Hip Hop Family Tree is celebrating its 10-year anniversary in 2023. Scoop those comics up, X-Men Grand Design and WYSIWYG. Links to all that stuff in my link tree in the description below this video. Jimmy, tell them what else.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, mugs, stickers, all kinds of stuff at our spread shop. That link is also below this video.
Great ways to support the channel, keep these videos rocking. Giving those marching orders will be on our way, Jimmy.
Make more comics.
Boom. We're making good time, huh, Jim?
Yes, plenty of time.
You know what I was thinking with the Copycat stuff? Like, if you want, we could use the Lone Wolf and Cub art book, get Ronin, and I could go grab. I know exactly where my X-Force 100 is. With the, if that can fit into your rubric.
You know what? That one's not quite it, because that's what I'd call an homage or even a swipe. And
you're talking about style.
Yeah, more style than anything.
So Ronin don't even count then, because he's using Mobius flavor.
He is, but I mean, like the flashback stuff to me is so Lone Wolf and Cub style.
Yeah.
And that style is what, I was just like blown away by. But yeah, it's definitely more on the style side. I was thinking of the homage stuff. And if this video does well, I think an homage video would be another one to do.
Yeah.
Or a swipe video, I guess. Swipe might be the way to describe it. Yeah, what Ed is talking about is one of the videos that I have this week. I don't know exactly what we're going to call it, but probably something along the lines of 5 copycat artists. And I say that with a lot of love. I actually really enjoy this kind of thing, but it is something that I think some people will respond to in a negative way.
Well, I mean, they're going to click it. Like the point is to get people to fucking click the videos. So my thing is, like, call it 5 biggest copycats in comics, and that'll get people to click it.
That's
you know, and then we do the videos how we do them, because like
I think it's really fun. Like, it's some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah.
Are these copycats?
Let me make a fresh tea right quick.
Take your time. I got to do a bathroom break. Anyway, so.
We're making real good time. So I suggest, like, we bang these videos out, sit with the King Kayfabers and debrief.
Yes. One
final session about, like, what Brian Bolland shit are we gonna talk about with this Killing Joke shit, and then fucking go set up and just get everything in order.
I don't know the best background for this because it goes all over the place, so I figure color's as good as anything.
Yeah, whatever you choose.
You guys have Jack Kirby's Dingbat Love? Man, if this is a book that slipped below your radar, you're in for a treat. This is a Tomorrow's book. I think it came out last year, but some really great Kirby art in this one. Simon. Yeah, I think this video is going to spark the copycat video. We are going to hear a lot about other people that maybe we've forgotten or just didn't make the cut. But yeah, here's the cover for the Kirby Dingbat Love book. It's a good one, man. It's incredible how much care goes into a book like this these days. Like, when you think of Kirby reprints I would buy as a kid, this one has really... This is about as deluxe as you get in presentation. All right, back in a minute, guys. Hey, do you have the Silver Star Graphite Edition?
Not easy on hand.
If you find it, if you come across it, pull it. Because, like, we could do that one, the reprint that's in color and glossy paper, and then, like, the original issues.
Yeah.
I think that could be a good one. That would be one, like, we should start stockpiling some of this stuff for a Tom week.
Right. right, boys and girls. 2 more vids in here. We'll kick it with you guys for a little bit, and then get prepped for Bolland. It's such a process, technical process to get all that stuff working. We have a webcam, we have another camera pointed down, we have the Zoom session. There's so much shit that we have to figure out whenever we do these guest host spots. But we're gonna parlay it, and we're doing the same thing again next week. So if you got some comic book buds that need to know about this, get them to join us, man. I'm just getting the stream up, Jimmy.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for everybody that shows up for these. And as Ed says, man, spread it around, because I feel like the bigger this community, the more enjoyable these sessions are.
Yeah.
I saw people posting today about like the fan group on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the thing. Like the part of this channel to me is what I loved when I found comic book shops.
Right.
It's what I loved when I found comic book conventions, when everybody got online. Like, that's the community part. And it's the fun part of, like, again, you find the cool thing, you can't wait to show it off to your friends. So spread the word around. I mean, like, I think that's one of the big benefits of this whole experience.
Keep those Bolland questions coming, man. We're paying attention real close to the chat. And thank you guys for providing all that insight and your thoughts during the Peter Laird shit, because it just adds confidence to the conversation, you know, to like have a little bit of an artillery to deploy at any time, man. If you start to get nervous about all the other stuff that we have to worry about while doing those things, just put one of those nuggets out and let the guys riff. I'm ready if you are, Jimmy. Are we locked in? All that good shit?
Not locked in.
Boom. Boom.
Yeah, hit it. Hello and welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
Before we begin today's video, I want to let everybody know we do have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon for you now. And the highest level, the King Kayfaber level of our Patreon, are watching this video record right now live in our chat room, going back and forth with some of them before we hit the record button. So we encourage you to check out our Patreon, see what level works for you, and join us there for all kinds of perks, including getting these videos ahead of the general population out there. I will also remind you that we are working Cartoonist, and the way we keep our lights on is by selling our books. So Ed has Red Room gearing up for a 3rd season, but 2 trade paperbacks out and available now. Hip Hop Family Tree, celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. X-Men Grand Design, WYSIWYG, add those to your collection if you haven't already. I have Hulk Grand Design, the oversized collection coming soon. Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, and Princess of Poverty, and the Plain Janes. So again, if these are missing from your shelf, pick them up now before they go out of print, because, boy, the way print is today, that can be expensive. But we are going to talk today about Jack Kirby's Dingbat Love.
Sorry, dude.
This book came out recently from Tomorrow's Publishing. They do a bang-up job. Super excited to actually dig into this and share it with everybody, because one of the great things of the current comic book publishing landscape is that we are able to see artist editions. We're able to see original art that was never published. It feels like so much of this stuff we have access to now, it really is like a dream time as a comics fan. And man, this book epitomizes where we're at in a lot of ways. And with the great Jack King Kirby at the centerpiece. So what this focuses on are magazines that he was doing whenever he leaves Marvel at the end of the 60s and goes to DC. A couple of those came out in the Days of the Mob and Spirit World, 1 issue of each of those. But there was much more planned, and DC pulls the plug on them before most of them come out. So we're going to see what those books were inside of here, as well as Dingbats of Danger Street, his last Kid Gang comic, I guess, and one of the weird genres from the Golden Age. Attempts to revive it in the 70s. 1 issue of that is published, but a couple are created. So we're kind of going to go through DC's in a way, pulling the carpet out from under Jack Kirby before he even gets started on that great 70s run at DC Comics.
So before you even crack open the book, published by Tomorrow's, a bunch of DC comics that they paid for.
Oh, yeah.
And never put out. If you ever needed evidence that DC Comics is not a book publisher and doesn't care about that, they are just the holders of 100-year-old licenses, this would be Exhibit A. Like, you're sitting on a gold mine of Kirby artwork for 50 years and you're not doing anything with it. It's shameful.
It's unbelievable when you phrase it that way. To think that they have this in their inventory and they haven't figured out a way to publish it themselves.
Yeah, and they couldn't be bothered. You know,
It's
they licensed it out to Tomorrow's.
You see right on this cover what we're going to see inside, which is a range from like pencils to the original art with inks to the colored, ready to publish version. And let's dig in and start going, because this really is a showcase for the eyeballs. And you see right away the original art on display. This book is full of it. There's a lot of, I'm going to say, research material, but really it's in the form of these kinds of forewords and introductions and different people that were there or part of it, like Mark Evanier. You often see him whenever it comes time to talk about Kirby. He was a longtime assistant with Kirby when Kirby moves to the West Coast. Mike Royer has some words in here. So, you really get a sense of what's going on and how did these books come together and what was the plan.
Yeah.
So, for instance, one of the books in here is called, I think it's called Soul Love. I'm not sure if they actually figured out a final name for it because it was never published. But one of the things that happens as DC starts to really warm up to this concept, Kirby suggests to them, an older, middle-aged or older Jewish man is not the guy to be creating this book. Like, if this is the direction you want to go, you should hire some upcoming young African-American creator to oversee this book. And it kind of speaks to the disorganization behind the scenes of DC, which is what's described in here, as to how you do complete issues that are then just pushed aside, never published, complete loss of money.
Goofy.
And part of this book, half of it focuses on soul love and true divorce tales. So we're going to look at Ladies Man, an article on some of the characters, the women characters that Jack Kirby created and kind of what his ability was in that front. And, a couple of the great Fourth World characters, Big Barda here and Granny Goodness.
You know what? It's also worth mentioning these Tomorrow's books. They are constructed by completely dedicated people who try to get as deep in the subject matter as possible. I think that most of that stuff, there's licenses involved, and those licenses often do not get re-upped. So there are books out there like the Kimoda book about Miracle Man, very expensive now. There's one on the Image Revolution, very expensive now. So these are very finite books. They pretty much get one printing and then they go away, and Tomorrow's just keeps the train rocking. So if there's any inkling that you want or need this book, you have to get it because it'll be very expensive this time next year maybe.
Yeah. This is still available, but definitely won't be for long probably. And you can see the cool pieces that they put together. Like you talk about Tomorrow's being kind of fans and researchers. They have to gather this artwork up, and in some cases they don't get it all. It's really like a scavenger hunt trying to find copies of this stuff and see what exists. But I love something like this where it's True Life Divorce, issue 1, handwritten table of contents. Like this really is like the mock-up of the idea for this series. And the idea was to do a series of magazines that would be sold to, in Kirby's words, he was trying to get new readers, different readers. I love the idea of True Life Divorce. Anybody that's unfamiliar with Kirby's history invented the romance comics that sold in giant numbers in the golden age. So you come back 20 years later, True Life Divorce. Now his ideal vision was that he was going to get guys to come in like John Romita Sr., these guys who had a history of romance comics under their belt, but now everybody's older. Maybe you have a good marriage, but people that don't. And let's tell these divorce tales, man. I think it's a brilliant idea. So the first story that you see here, and it would have been an anthology type series, several stories per issue, and that's what we're going to get. So in this first one, you're seeing reproduction of the pencils, which Kirby starts doing in the 70s.
My bad.
And thank goodness for him getting a photocopier and having so much of this preserved. If you guys read the Kirby Collector, you often see a lot of this work. Such tight pencils. I remember the first time I got a Kirby's Collector and was like, wait a minute. When he's drawing 8 pages a day or something, I was expecting like almost Harvey Pekar kind of stick figures and loose. And then you would see these pencils and everything's drawn. It's all there. But you gotta love that technology, and that Kirby had access to make photocopies of all this stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
These are great. But you see, again, when did they pull when does DC editorial decide they're not going to do this? Like some of these stories, this was done at the time. This was not something Tomorrow's commissioned.
It says a lot about Mike Royer's process if he is in fact the inker.
This might be Coletta. Coletta and Royer and D. Bruce Berry are all represented in this volume.
Right.
And I think this is Coletta probably.
Getting those faces in first.
I love seeing though, like, where do you start? What are you starting with on your pages? Because everybody's a little different in that front. But it's also neat to me that Kirby was writing these comics directly on the pages.
And he just knew the exact point size because his balloons would just be traced. Like the lettering always fit in there, and it was always oriented pretty well.
I also love this stuff that you're going to see throughout here. I hate to say it's like Kirby trying to do fashion, but he's so good at like figuring out like put a pattern on a dress or on a couch.
It's like
or
Kirby
something.
Tech.
Kirby Tech
on a dress. I've seen dresses like that.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, that certainly doesn't seem out of place, although they do talk about some of this stuff where, the Kirby fourth world kind of language, pretty weird if it's like young people dating or something. Sometimes it's very odd.
I mean, Jimmy Olsen, man, like talk about marijuana cigarettes or something like that.
This story, the model, you see an African-American woman as your main character here. This is what launches Soul Love. DC gets this in and looks at it and is like, oh yeah, we could go in this direction. And I don't know if that's a reflection of things like blaxploitation would have been, coming on at that point, or what made them think that was a good direction to go. Seems like a brilliant direction, but also seems like ahead of DC. I don't think of DC editorial as being that brilliant when it's like, let's try we've got a new audience here, a potential new book.
Yeah, that along with the divorce thing, like it's very, very timely, where there's like less of a stigma on divorce and things like that, so you could like explore that, and civil rights stuff happen, just prior to this.
Man, this is almost Kirby. I feel like a self-portrait here of this guy. This is an older man hooking up with a younger woman, and they talk a little bit in some of the extra materials in the book about Kirby's ability to draw beautiful women, because sometimes he's drawing warrior women, like he has a wide range of that. And I feel like this is your classic Hollywood starlet type.
It's as beautiful as it gets when it comes to Kirby, we'll put it that way.
And the story in this one, the other woman, is this older man who's longtime love versus the younger.
There's a pattern with all that divorce shit. It's like you put a couple extra lines under the eyes of the lady who's going to be getting cheated on or left.
That's right. We have a ongoing character who is going to work through the true life divorce, and this mascot was going to be like a marriage counselor.
He's the crypt keeper of the divorce comic. And just look at that. That's a shady fella, man. Like he's sneaking in the cut. He sees the chink in the armor. He's banging all your wives.
It made me think of the professor in Weapon X. These were just extra pages. There was like a 3-page story at the back. Not sure exactly how this magazine was going to shape up. Again, it didn't make it to that point. So what you ended up with, if you're putting this book together by Tomorrow's, is you've got these short stories and exactly how they were planned or how they would fit together in publication. It's not known. A lot of this information, Kirby worked fast, and a lot of this information, it's just not around anymore. It went to the grave with him in a lot of cases. But as a fan, what you get to see here is pencils versus Mike Royer doing your inks. So you get that comparison, which I always enjoyed too. Royer, the inker that I probably most connect to with Kirby work, because that was the stuff I could afford when I started buying Jack Kirby work, and I love it. I think he's regarded as the guy who was most close to the Kirby pencils in terms of fidelity. Whether that makes him your favorite Kirby inker or not, you definitely get to see him preserving a lot of the Kirby marks, translating them to ink. And I always love this kind of stuff where it's like, all the backgrounds, you think of Kirby as bombast and action, but he drew everything.
Oh, yeah. He knows what to put in a room to make it feel like it should.
Yeah. And again, your true life divorce host.
Sneaking in the cut, man. He's got the body count.
All right. So getting into some background now on Soul Romance. This is another piece that makes these books valuable.
My other dude, man, there's only two cartoonists from Homestead, PA, me and Matt Baker.
Nice.
The creator of Headlight Comics.
Yeah. And you get this history. You get a history of some Matt Baker stuff and speculation as to whether he and Kirby knew each other personally.
Oh, that's interesting.
Around this time, he's working in Coletta's studio, so they probably at least knew of each other. You also get some history on Black Comics and what had been going on up to, say, 1970 or 1971, what had been published. And obviously, not a lot. And then we get this kind of development, right? So mock-ups of what Soul Love may have looked like, some of the Kirby, washes, putting together a possible cover mock-up. And then ultimately, they enlist Alex Ross to do what would be, this is essentially like an issue, so they're putting together from the pieces what this might look like if it were a real issue. And up to this point, we have either matte coat or uncoated paper. Now we're going to go glossy, because the idea is this would have been a magazine.
Yeah.
A high-end glossy magazine sold on the newsstands, and that's what you get. You switch paper stocks.
And listen, Alex Ross is a business. See, he is an institution. He did not get paid commensurate to what he can charge for this piece in his Tomorrow's book. That speaks to his love of the material, to his relationship with the Tomorrow's guys, to do this kind of thing. He took a pay cut, in a substantial one, I'm sure, to do that. And it just speaks to his reverence for Jack Kirby.
Absolutely. I can't say enough about this kind of thing, though, being in the middle of this book, where it's like suddenly we've got a glossy magazine to really illustrate what this might have been like, what the plans were for this. And one of the things I love is the lack of borders. It almost feels like cell animation at times, the way this color is laid down. And I know we talk a ton about color, and this is one of those places where coloring Kirby, and especially on gloss paper, what a challenge that is.
Yeah.
They're using gradations and things in backgrounds, but then flat colors on the figures. And I think the figures, it works really well. The backgrounds, it works in some spots better than others, I would say. But I do think that's a challenge that a lot of people face making comics, is figuring out how to do color well. I actually love these gradations of the blue on the red. I think that's a really bold choice, and it works for me. I would not expect to like this, but I do. And I like it more than maybe the purple-orange combo. It may just be the blue and red that speaks to me. But it's so interesting to kind of see how do you color something like that today with all the colors that we have?
It would never be done in gray. Like an old Kirby comic would never be colored with those kind of colors right there. So
almost looks like a collage, to go with the gray and then have the flat purple.
Right, like it's a photostat.
Yeah. So I like those things. To me, that's a happy accident that I might play with, if I were going to try to color with this kind of approach. But it makes me think that the color palette, I think you've got to limit your color palette.
Yeah, this shit is, you need to enlist some better help, I think, man.
Yeah, this is more of that almost the collage feeling, where your background feels like you're pulling it out of something else and pasting those figures in the foreground. Yeah. I love the texture on her sweater.
Well, what's your opinion on it?
This works for me as a collage. I don't love it here. It really is like a panel by panel piece. And I think sometimes it works. This gradation, I don't care for, but I can see why you would do it, because you want that point of interest. It'd be the equivalent if this were a light colored panel of putting a black spot in the middle.
Yeah.
But here in this case, you're putting a light spot, and it is where you want to go. So I get it. Not quite there for me, but interesting. It's certainly an approach to color that I haven't seen very often, and would build on this approach to color. And who knows, might build on it in upcoming projects. Look at this, even a slick ad. This was one of the things that Kirby envisioned in this series of magazines, and they talk about in some of the ancillary material. DC had no outlet for this. They had no method of selling ads to the high-end advertisers, which is crazy to think of. They're, 2 blocks from Madison Avenue.
Right.
But also, aren't there sales mechanisms for that? Aren't there people that would specialize? If you were going to do a line of glossy magazines, hire somebody, even if it's freelance, as your advertising liaison, if you're really going to try to make this move.
Yeah.
To just outright say we can't do that.
That doesn't work for me. That does not work for me.
So disappointing.
Yeah, that does not work for me, because you ain't even trying.
The most successful cartoonist in comics at this time period. He shows up with these ideas, And instead of figuring out a way to like make this work, you just go,
Lot-
we don't know how to sell high end advertising.
Yeah, a lot of laziness for sure in the jobs of.
How about this for a totally different approach to color now? You know, like this is all bright saturated pieces in this story. This piece reminds me of his original Young Romance, where
Yeah.
it's like the collage, you know,
The sculpture guy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and then you know your ads. This is so cool to see this as like a real magazine setup, where like these are the ads for Spirit World and in the days of the mob that actually were published.
Yeah, we got a video on this one.
And DC did books on both of these where they include the extra material that they paid for but did not end up publishing. And again, you'd have some editorial in your magazine. That was something that is noted that Kirby had in mind, is that you would have some text pieces in here. This is the original art is on your inside, on the end pages of this volume.
The way he can make a 4-panel page sing, dude, it's such an odd composition. You know, it's skinny and tall.
It does a lot of these 4-page
Yeah,
panel.
this period of time he was doing that.
It looks good in the magazine format. You know, like it almost, I feel like you could sell this easier to a non-comics reader because it's pretty simple to understand how to follow it.
Yeah.
And I think if you worked on this style, it also lends itself to illustration. You know, it's almost like same images. And I think that could have been interesting if you'd have seen a couple of issues worth of really working and thinking this way. Interesting spotting of black here.
Right, just breaking things up.
Almost abstract.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can see again the whole plan: Dracula Forever, True Life Divorce, Soul Love, The Real Face of War. Going to do war comics in this magazine format.
So fascinating that it's James Warren that got the big two nervous and basically created a new market. Like before Jim Warren did it, those salespeople at Marvel and DC would be like, "Oh, we can't do magazines.
Yeah.
We can't do it. Like we don't have a mechanism for that. We do this size." You just got to prove them. You just got you got to be road tested, and then they'll glom on.
And then you get to see a piece of original art reproduction, one of the stories.
See, I was gonna say this, man. Looking at the stuff, because like the faces did not look Kirby-ish, and you could see right here that they got the Infantino Raiders or somebody to like redraw these faces. That ain't Kirby.
No, and they mention that in again in this extra text stuff that goes with this, that his faces were very realistic, and they actually had their bullpen go over them and sort of comic book them up.
It's so funny. They say they're just not realistic. He draws eyes far apart, and they look crazy. Like that sounds propagandistic, man. Show me the realistic Kirby faces.
Yeah, they talk that it's greater variety of faces too.
Yeah.
So I think that he was probably very conscious of this idea of like he's going to draw African American characters as this, again, as he calls himself, you know, an old Jewish guy. So I think that he was looking a little bit closer at references for faces. Talks about Ebony Magazine was something that I guess Mark Evanier would have been sent out to like go get a clip of this for reference.
Look, these are future episodes we need to do, Jimmy. Got this one on. We did this one. Got this one on the hook. That's a Joe Simon joint.
Did we do this one? Because I
No.
like this comic a lot. I know I've thought
Didn't do
about
Atlas
doing it.
either.
Yeah. So this is your second half of the book is Dingbats of Danger Street. So now you get context of that and what was going on with that. And some of the stuff that he's drawing, you know, like Cobra, these like one-off kind of throwaway type pieces.
Boys Ranch. I think we got a video of that. I'm not sure if we put that out. Me and Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, Boys Ranch is great. That one was reprinted in the 90s. Like, that's one of those I got hold of pretty early on.
Yeah, we got an issue, though. Like, because, you know, that's Tom, dude. So Kirby's his guy. He gets those issues.
All right, so there are two completed issues. Issues 2 and 3, I guess it would have been, of Dingbats of Danger Street. And again, the deluxe version of this book, we've got fold-outs. We've got original art being shown.
By deluxe version, are you saying there's multiple versions of this, or it's deluxe in its production?
Deluxe in its production.
Okay.
Like, Tomorrow's really, I think, did a phenomenal job of putting this book together.
Absolutely. Nice matte paper for this, because we're not going glossy magazine, we're going comic book.
This is another one, though, where I look at the color and I think, like, why? Because this color doesn't do it for me. And it's almost flat, you know. I mean, it is flat color. Sometimes they're using, like, a second shade. And I think it's getting away from the palette.
Yeah.
And it's, I think that's it. If I had to single out, like, what's the issue?
Yeah, because once again, this would be like purples, probably. if it was in the comic. This is way more saturated, and there actually might be black in this. There's definitely black in this, which is never done, which is like against all rules set forth by the fucking Renaissance masters and shit.
Also, you can see, well, maybe, I don't know if you can see it at home or not, but this looks like it's more of a photocopy.
Yeah.
Compared to, like, this is a really nice piece
thicker
of art that they're using, but this one's a little bit beat up.
Yeah. I like it because I like that smear of that lettering. It feels very Golden Age.
Yeah, it might be something, too, like, color-wise, you just need a little more texture on the color.
Yeah.
To help it
That's
integrate.
This stuff you were talking about, man, that little 10% yellow. Like, they need to read that Jordan Crane, Ron Rigi, Dave Cho, Brian Ralph Guide to Reproduction.
Totally.
It's the Bible.
One of the interesting things with this Dingbats story is we get much more serious, heavy. You know, that first issue is kind of fun and lively. This we're getting a little bit more serious, where our main character, we're getting an origin where this villain kills his family. You know, and so when he comes back in contact with that guy, suddenly the stakes are a little bit different than issue 1.
Dude, can you imagine this? This would be like that one great Steranko splash for his one Captain America, where it's like each panel he's using every color that corresponded with like a purple in the old 64 colors, and the blue, like using every blue, every red, every green. Like that's a version of that.
It's such a striking whole page. I love Vengeance giant across the top.
Yeah, that
love it all, the eyes in the middle.
Unmistakable Mike Royer lettering. Kirby playing around with these kind of panels at that time, which is real fun.
It's a cool page. You know, busting up your panel borders like they aren't straight because this is flashback and color indicating, reinforcing that.
So inspiring.
It's really nice, and I like this first issue so much because it did feel like I don't know, a little bit of a throwback, and maybe even, I don't want to say autobiographical, but anytime I see like urban streets in Kirby work, it makes me think of like Kirby childhood.
Right.
So kind of amazing that these things show up and that they exist. And again, let's look at what we're looking at here. Pencils on your left, and then the inked and colored piece. This is going to be D. Bruce Berry on this third issue.
Yeah.
Mike Royer was on that previous one we just looked at.
And this is like, you know, this is the 70s. So it's like these thermal scan photostat. It's like pre-Xerox or something.
Yeah, I don't know how they did it. Sometimes they look really good. Sometimes they're a little bit, grayed out, not as smooth. But they must have had to do the fold-outs. Like if you did one, for a 2-page spread, you must have had to do 2.
Right.
Or something. Because it's strange. Like this one doesn't make, it's not obvious why you would do a 2-page fold-out on here. So
it's cool to have the comparison, nonetheless.
Absolutely. And you get to see the pencil and the ink and color comparisons throughout this story, which again just makes for a very, very nice book. I love this stuff. There's, I think, Pencils and Inks is one of the books that we looked at.
Yeah.
Of Kirby.
Artisan edition.
Yeah, that compares those two things.
First issues of Demon, Commandy, and maybe Omak.
Yeah, it sounds right. So, if you missed out on that, because that's one of those books that went out of print and has skyrocketed in price.
Yeah.
This is a pretty nice consolation piece, because it does show a lot of his pencils, a lot of his inks, a lot of original art.
And this is one of the pieces where like I want it. I don't want the color. Like when I get to see the pencils next to it, like I'm not looking for that computer color of modern day. Like let me see that pencil and ink.
I like seeing the D. Bruce Berry versus the Mike Royer.
Absolutely.
That you get a story from each one and you get to see their lettering and everything is really cool. The one nice thing of having the finished art next to the pencils is it does make it very readable. The more legible lettering.
There's some veteran, I was having a conversation, and he said that Kirby, about D. Bruce Berry's inking, said something like, I think the guy needs to work. Like I want the guy to have a job. Meaning he was not thrilled with the D. Bruce Berry inks, but he also did not want to fucking fire a guy.
Sure. Yeah, I don't. He's not my favorite Kirby inker.
Yeah.
But like I say, in a thing like this, I feel like it's a really nice to have this side by side, to see it in these different states, and it's always interesting to see like how somebody interprets this stuff. When I first started getting Kirby collectors, like I'd scan and print some of the pencils and ink them just for fun, because they were so inviting, and you can kind of see it some of these pages make me want to.
Right.
You know, his pencils are so inviting, I think, for an inker. I'm surprised inkers weren't just lined up waiting to be like, yeah, let me line up for Dingbats of Danger Street 3.
Here's a question, people, and put something in the comments if you know the deal, because this is DC Comics and shit. Did Joe Kubert ever ink a piece of Kirby? And if so, tell us what that is, because I would be so curious about that tandem. Kubert with his very organic, speedy line, like what would that look like on a Kirby? I want to see that.
I would too. He has such a distinct ink line.
He does.
Kubert.
It becomes his.
It's very drawn.
Yeah.
Which would be neat to see on Kirby stuff.
Exactly.
Kirby's pencils are so much more stylized than I ever expected. Like, seeing the first time I saw a Kirby pencil, it really blew me away. Steve Sherman was another assistant to Kirby in this era. So, again, kind of like recalling what he remembers from this era. Which, again, well done, Two Morrows, of like really creating a snapshot of what this stuff is, what do people remember of what it was, you know, what the aspirations were for it, what the circumstances were, why it didn't come together. And then Two Morrows, man, sometimes I think they're underappreciated. You see
they are underappreciated.
How much work they do. These American comic book chronicle books that cover like decades, these are great. I think there were some in our library, is how I ended up reading a few of them. They're so much fun, and they go all the way up into the 90s. And man, like the 80s, if you love like indie comics and stuff, they're great. They're awesome. They go from golden age to, you know, basically the end of the century.
Two Morrows is one of those great publishers that, you know, I bet with the way that they set things up, I bet everything makes some money, but there's no gangbuster. And these are books that are so good for the culture of comics, but it's esoteric. Like, you got to be deep. And I'm just so thankful that they, you know, put their money where their fandom is and realize this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it feels like they're really a when you think of fandom, like keeping a lot of comics history before it became accepted on a wider basis, Two Morrows is sort of the legacy of that.
Yeah,
they really maintain this stuff, and they track down the stuff that, man, I didn't know any of this. You know, like all of this is new to me, and I scratched my head, man. True Life Divorce seems like it would have been a hit.
Super fun, man. I know that I'm scooping this one before the recording day is done.
This feels like a Kayfabe Effect book.
Oh, totally. And once again, those Two Morrows books, once they're gone, they're gone. There's never a second printing.
Yeah. Pick it up.
Try to get those old Kirby collectors. You'll see. Kayfabers, if you want to mitigate that kayfabe effect, join our Patreon at the highest level, and you are watching us record this video right now. Dozens and dozens of people in that chat room right now who are also priming us for big interviews that we are doing after our recording sessions, and they are getting the videos before anybody else. But there are several ways to support the channel. Jimmy, tell the people what books you got out.
Buy our books. My latest, Hulk Grand Design, will be in comic shops in February, and I cannot stress enough, pre-order that one, reserve your copy, because it is selling fast on Amazon. It was a #1 bestseller last weekend. Thank you all for that. But if you want a copy, I would say reserve that. Let your store know sooner rather than later. Street Angel Deadliest Girl Live, and coming soon, Princess of Poverty and the Plain Janes, also available from me. You can join me on patreon.com/JimRugg to see lots more of my comics and art in progress. You can download out-of-print zines and mini comics there. And one of my recent posts, get into my recent batch of oil paintings for those who are curious. So please join me there.
Red Room Crypto Killers issue #1 is being solicited in your comic shops right now. It's the 2023 round of Red Room comics. They're going to come out on a monthly basis over the course of 4 months, and you can get the trade paperbacks on the racks right now. There are the Antisocial Network trade paperback and Trigger Warnings on the stands right now. Hip Hop Family Tree celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year. X-Men Grand Design is out in the wild, and the occasional WYSIWYG you might discover. Grab those comics, support the channel. Hit up my Patreon, and you could read the serialized Red Room comics before they hit paper. Link tree in the description below this video to get to all those destinations. Jimmy, tell the people what else we have.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, stickers, mugs, fanny packs, and more at our spread shop. That link is also below this video.
Another great way to support the channel. Give them those marching orders. We'll be on our way.
Make more comics.
Eric Reynolds. I can't believe I didn't tell you this, and I don't know where it is. It's close. But he sent us pages from the Marvel tryout kit to ink. So like that could be an episode. And I think he really responded to that episode and was like, yeah, dudes, it was fucking remaindered. Like, he got like 5 of them. And,
No way.
And it might be the same pages that we can ink. But I feel like you still got to just scan it in and print up blue lines rather than fuck those up. But I think that would be a fun thing. I want you to keep the War Guard or whatever kind of close, because like there's a video I want to do of and you're the best guy to kind of curate this stuff because my shit is all over the place. But the top 5 like outlaw comics that you don't know about. And War Guard is high on that list.
War Guard's amazing.
Icon Devil. You know, that Sean Patty dude, he had $250 pages during COVID on
Get out.
on eBay. Yeah, they might still be up there. Kayfabers might be. Close your ears. Close your ears.
Wait until you see these two. This is what started this whole movement. All right. So this is a Frank Miller stack.
Yeah. I could tell by the Mike Netzer Huntress.
Bisley, Corbin, McFarlane. It's mainly John Cleary. I don't know if I'm even going to show Shadow Slasher. And Jay Lee and Stephen Platt.
Sick.
The stuff is...
I hope there's more than 5, though.
There are.
Okay, good.
6.
Good. Yeah, because you want to say top 5, but you always got to... You what is it? You under promise but over deliver?
Sure.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Good to go?
Yeah, hit it. Hello and welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
Very fun episode today, Ed. Before we dive into that, I want to remind everybody we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon now. Multiple layers there. And the top level, King Kayfaber, is actually watching us record these videos now. And today is going to be one of those videos that pays off to be in the front of the Kayfabe effect, because we're going to look at some books that you probably aren't familiar with at home but may want to add to your collection. So join our Patreon and get a little bit of a lead on what we're going to be showing off. You get our videos early. You get to hang out with us while we record and get into some fun conversations there. The other thing I want to remind everyone, we are working cartoonists. The way we pay our bills is to sell books. So Ed's Red Room, Trigger Warnings, and Antisocial Network available now. The 3rd season of Red Room gearing up and starting soon. I believe you can pre-order that one already. Hip Hop Family Tree celebrating 10 years. X-Men Grand Design. WYSIWYG, all available from Ed Piscor's pen. And you can pick up Hulk Grand Design. The oversized collection is coming to stores soon. Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, and Princess of Poverty, and the Plain Janes are my offerings that you can pick up wherever books are bought and sold. We appreciate that. If they're not on your shelf already, please add them. Ed, super fun video. I've been wanting to do this one for a while. Not even sure how to describe this exactly. We're calling it Copycats, but I promise you at home, this is coming from a place of love. These are artists who I identify as very much referencing other artists in their style, in their approach, and I have no problem with that. You know, there's going to be a lot of cool comments, I think, below this of other books that you could look at and say, oh yeah, a lot of Mike Mignola on those pages, even though it's not a Mike Mignola book, things of that nature. So I brought, we're going to look at 5 of these, and we can begin now, and I'm sure everybody at home will kind of see what I'm talking about as we actually dive into a few of these. And the very first one, Richard Corbin, is who I'm going to say this artist probably enjoys.
Yeah, but not that cover artist, because that's a style biter of somebody else.
Very true. So the first one is War Guard, a really fun outlaw kind of black and white comic by Sean Patty. Absolutely love it. And if he doesn't love Richard Corbin, take away my comics pass.
Yeah, no doubt. And
this is Corbin on steroids, maybe some Bisley sprinkled in there, but I see Corbin love.
What's the year on War Guard?
This is 1997.
Yeah, so like it feels like the Richard Corbin kind of this period in a way, like the one that's like just getting involved in like DC Comics with Brian Azzarello and stuff. He was doing like his lighting look kind of like this, but Sean Patty is his own man, and it's taking it to extremes. Not the last War Guard we're going to be seeing on the Kayfabe channel.
No, and it's worth mentioning that I do think Sean Patty takes, there's some major Richard Corbin ingredients in this book.
Little BWS.
But he is definitely adding to it, making it his own, and making for just a fantastic comic. This is one I randomly found, digging through dollar bins. Didn't know it existed, fell in love with it instantly, and lucky us, there's at least 2 issues that are available. Man, the guy's putting a lot on these pages. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. The beauty of digging in the bins, man, is you grab anything you never heard of, and you just give it a glance.
That's right.
Very often, it's dismal. There's a reason why you have never heard of it, but every now and then you come across something like this. And you can't leave that in the bin. You will regret it for the rest of your life. You'll be thinking about it. You'll be dreaming about it because there's a hopeful piece to it. Like, this could be a great comic and just the guy doesn't have like this or that X factor to like put himself out there. I feel like there's some biz in that right there.
Yeah, which makes sense. I think there's some Corbin and Bisley.
Sure.
Which is part of what makes this a fun topic for me. Is this is not a slam against any of these artists, because we are all borrowing from everybody. And what happens a lot of times, a young artist will really show their influence on their sleeve when maybe there's a couple of people that are big influences. And then as you go on and have 10,000 influences, your stuff becomes your own because it's, a finger from somebody, an eyeball from somebody, and pretty soon it's impossible to kind of take it apart. It really does become your own. But these comics, man, this is what I hope to find whenever I go to a comic book shop. Just absolutely beautiful stuff, page after page. And you can see the page counts. These are big, oversized issues. So anybody watching at home, if you come across one of these War Guards, you will not be disappointed to add that one to your take. And kind of funny to think that there are a couple of big Richard Corbin guys out there. This is John Cebollero. Not sure if I'm saying that right or not, but also... one of the guys that are in a lot of these is Rick Parker. So I have 2 examples of this John Cebollero. Again, kind of randomly found him. You can see it's Event Comics, which was Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti's company. And in this case, it's Cebollero and Parker teaming up. And they just say story, art, and letters. So I don't know how exactly this is working, who's doing what. But
you certainly see the Rick Parker letters, no doubt.
I mean, this is another one of those where, for me, as a black and white comic, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, this is good. I don't know this. And dude, go back one page.
Yeah, exactly. The Richard Corbin is not, I guess I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth here. Clearly, that influence is on the sleeve there. There's never enough Richard Corbin in my collection, so if you really want to idolize him, the nice thing when somebody's really into a certain style or an artist, you'll see that art through a different lens.
Right.
It's never going to be exactly whoever the inspiration is.
I'll say this is pretty sharp stuff, because very often what people will do, and we'll see it in one of the primo examples you're going to show off towards the end of this video, I guess. But they will just take the surface elements, the most superficial, shallow pieces of their work, and this guy's solid.
Yeah, really fun stuff. And I have found 2 examples of his work so far. This Kid Death and Fluffy, the second one, same deal. It's very Richard Corbin-esque, but it's a much shorter series or story. But what you see here is we're at a comic book convention and we see creepies and eeries, and I don't think that's accidental. There really is an acknowledgement, I think, of what we're pulling from in here. So
you can't have one without the other.
Absolutely beautiful stuff, in my opinion. And I mentioned Bisley a couple times, so I'm going to bring Alex Horley up next. Horley is a guy who I think can do everything. If you follow his career, he's done a bunch of different books and a bunch of different styles. There are times when he's channeling Bisley, and so that's what I thought I would pull out in this case, but not the only thing that Horley does. Like, this guy really can do it all.
And not the only Bisley style biter. Go to any sort of late 90s, 2000 AD comic, and there's a lot of those guys who really get close. Mm-hmm. Even there would be we did episodes of Wizard or something where Glenn Fabry and Bisley were kind of going back and forth, and Bisley's like, yeah, Glenn Fabry always is 2 steps behind me and shit like that. But that was almost like an editorial mandate, it felt like, to have your Bisley rippers, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of names named in the comments to that effect.
And hopefully some I'm not familiar with. It'll give me some new Bisley-esque stuff to look at. But this one's kind of cool because there's both painting and line art.
Just like Biz does, man.
Exactly. And, you see it. It's the oversized muscles, the oversized boobs, just all the stuff that I think is a Bisley trademark. Veins popping out of these muscles.
No backgrounds.
No backgrounds. Horns, on your helmets. I think you can see the Bisley at home, especially if you're a Bisley fan. It's pretty apparent. But, I mentioned that he does all these different styles, Alex Horley, and you can see some of that stuff in these doing throwbacks, right? This is a comic about comics history, so you have to have some of your golden age stuff, and you can see his ability to do that. But here we go back into the Bisley paradigm of the present, although this present 20 years ago at this point. But I mean, very Bisley-esque, some of these images. And yeah, I would love to see everybody calling out some of the other Bisley-esque elements out there. So this guy, I think we've talked about Cleary before.
Yeah, he was first on my radar with the comics that were packed in with the toys for Spawn.
Okay, so this is a Todd McFarlane-esque is who I would point to, and some of it is more McFarlane than other parts. Definitely, I think his line art, like the surface stuff, is probably the most McFarlane-esque stuff, and McFarlane employed him for things.
And then he went full McFarlane, that with Boof and the Bruise Crew and shit like that.
That's pretty full on McFarlane in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is probably where people could call out. I think Cleary was a part of that. Like there was that Hall of Heroes company.
Yes, and there were a few artists in Hall of Heroes that would remind me of.
And I think Cleary is one of them. I think he had something.
Yeah, I can't remember. I feel like we may have done something like this in the past where we just look at McFarlane. It might have been in a Wizard episode.
Yeah.
But when Image first starts, there are so many people that are doing McFarlane style. Like really, I mean, he's the big guy. And then once there's like the Extreme Studios and the Wild Storm, you get to see like a bunch of Liefeld guys, a bunch of Jim Lee guys. And McFarlane didn't have that studio. So you end up seeing a lot of these other artists that sort of exert their influence on people. But McFarlane, for a while in that late 80s, early 90s, there were a lot of artists that were really sort of following his example, if you will. And an example here in black and white of John Cleary's work.
This was a dream to me to like be able to get to see McFarlane's pen and ink in black and white.
It's a wonder McFarlane hasn't done a Spawn black and white of just re-releasing those original Spawn issues in black and white. I think there'd be an audience for that.
Yeah, totally.
Almost like the Vertigo Essentials.
You can see Cleary is pulling from that whole Image era, man. Like, some Jay Scott, Jim Lee-ish type shit right there.
Yeah, that also happens, I think, in a lot of these.
Yeah,
not nearly as much McFarlane there. Although some of those marks feel like they line up that way. I always wonder what happened to Cleary because like he was a young dude and did a lot of work. Like here he is on Satan 6.
It's the danger. It's the danger of playing around with these styles and not really developing your own style because those guys are flash in the pan styles. And when that shit goes away and you don't have your own identity, you're fucked, man.
That's fair. The cartoon distortion of this, I love it. That kind of stuff just screams at me.
It looks like that Doom Squad or whatever. Grant Morrison.
He'd have been great on a look like that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think he's legit good, John Cleary, and that's why it disappoints me that we don't have more comics from him. He shines brightly for a short period. But this is the Topps Kirby verse stuff. There are actual Kirby pages in here, inked by some interesting guys like Frank Miller, inking a Jack Kirby page right here. How about that for a crazy pull? Because, I mean, I'm sure this was, a 50-cent book that I pulled out. But talk about getting, like, some real bombast, in an issue. And you can see, I think, Cleary is still marks that resemble McFarlane, but has gone in a different direction in terms of, like, his figures and the cartoony style, really pushing, and probably pushing into his own. This... I didn't check the chronology, but I bet you this is later stuff.
I mean, that is Doom Squad hatching right there.
Dude.
Like, can you even call that hatching? If you could fit your finger in between the lines, is it hatching?
Mark Pacella and Dan Panosian would do this on some of those X-Force fill-in issues.
Absolutely, they would.
And I hated it at the time, and now I look at it and I absolutely love it. I brought Shadow Slasher along. This one is probably stylistically, you'll see a lot of different probably influences in here. I think there's some McFarlane isms. This is almost tone-wise McFarlane because there's religious stuff in it.
The sort of weird. Oh, there's Jay Lee to it.
Yeah.
The weird way he draws these faces is so common for that like mid '90s self-published comic creator.
I thought that the building there very McFarlane-esque, which is an odd thing to pull out.
It's just adding more windows to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shadow Slasher, for anyone unfamiliar, this was published for, I mean, this is issue 7. I think there's actually more issues than that. Ran for a while, and you know, again, the Image influence at this time is huge. It's cool that you mentioned Jay Lee, because I have a Jay Lee in here that I'm going to pull out. I think this kind of like just marks on every piece. That's one of those McFarlane-isms, but really it's kind of an Image-ism.
There's a lot of folk art to this one, because this guy doesn't know the tools that are typically used and shit, and you just see all this like tech pen kind of stuff being done.
Yeah,
you know, it's very outsider.
It is. But you mentioned Jay Lee, and these guys would be so influential for like windows of time.
Yeah.
You know, and then their influence changes or their style changes, and I feel like that can be lost. You know, if you weren't around looking at this stuff at the time, you might not remember it.
Right.
But one that I think everybody's going to remember is Frank Miller.
I feel like you should close out on the Frank, because it's such a big piece, man.
That is a big piece. A little teaser there for you guys to stick through the end of this video. You mentioned Jay Lee, so let's go to Jay Lee next. Ravager #1. This is actually what started me. These 2 issues are what made me want to do this video. So this is going to be Stephen Platt. This is going to be Jay Lee. I just found these recently. This is 1997, but the Jay Lee to me is the Savage Namor era. This is the Jay Lee that I fell in love with. It was the early, you know, some of the first Jay Lee I saw where it's like, this dude's doing stuff that nobody else is doing. Jay Lee, I mean. And then I think this guy was like, oh yeah, I agree with you. Because like the silhouette figures was something that you would see in a lot of those Namor issues that he was putting out quick. This kind of like spikes and almost highlights. The wrinkles on the skin of the face. These are all things you can find in that Jay Lee Namor run.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, that's in the Image stuff. Like, that's Chapel. Like, there's plenty of that. The eye wrinkle stuff. Like, okay, this kind of shit is definitely like the Savage Namor thing.
This ponytail, I think, is a very Jay Lee-esque treatment of ponytail. You were mentioning tools, Ed. This is like a ballpoint pen or a ruler ball pen for like your background hatching.
And the dude just doesn't care about lettering at all. Like, it's illegible.
It's pretty dense too. It's one of those guys that's like really putting stuff on.
And you cannot tell how to read it. Like, this dude just wants to draw.
You know, that not telling how to read it stuff? Feels like Jay Lee of that era, man. He was doing, I think, at some points like 9 pages a day. And it was like all these were like figures were all silhouettes.
See, this is another like folk arty piece, because this guy like discovered Jay Lee and just went ham. See,
Yes.
see, this is like that Youngblood Strike File type shit.
Definitely. Yeah, I was such a Jay Lee mark of that time period that like whenever you pull it out of the 50-cent bin, Ed, and you flip it open and you're like, oh, this is going home with me.
Oh, this comes home.
This is such a sweet spot for my own kind of personal history of comics. But like even the folds in the clothing, if you were really into Jay Lee in that early 90s time period, it's all over these pages. And it always makes me wonder, like, does this guy go on to do more? If you're Jay Lee, did you see this? I mean,
Right.
it's through and through.
That's
you know?
the ads, you know, for the Chapel Comics.
Yeah, I love this stuff. And like I said, I was excited to figure out, like, how do we look at this in a way, you know, what's an excuse to look at this? Because I don't know that, I've never heard this comic mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes these outlaw comics will have they'll be known, even if I haven't seen them, you know, you've heard of them. But this is something I had never heard of, and it was just like such a cool piece to pull out. And then Morbid Angel #3. So London Knight is definitely a publisher that's out there, you know, probably known for kind of bad girl stuff. And what I saw whenever I opened this, pencils by Shelby Robertson. I don't know about inks aren't credited, so I don't know if this is, I can't imagine this is reproduced from the pencils.
No.
So maybe he's doing pencils and inks. Maybe it's just not a credit that I saw there. But first thing you see are the gigantic quad muscles, striations already starting to.
Here's how deep it is, though. Like just show page 1 again real quick. These are Stephen Platt hands. Like, that's from Moon Knight.
Yeah.
The exact way they're drawn. So this guy is like looking at Stephen Platt at the most molecular level. This is something that always struck me with the Stephen Platt stuff was when he would have these like gigantic bulgy muscles, but there's like a spandex pant, and there's just one little tent, like a little bridge of fabric from one quad to the next through that line, was just genius.
I never knew, like, is that supposed to be a vein? And then also, like, Del Keown would do sort of that kind of thing, too. And I would always wonder, like, how do you do that through the hatching? Like, it must have been white outed, and then you put your shadow under it. Yeah, I loved it, too. I was with you 100%. This is a 1997 publication as well. And it makes me wonder, like, what state Extreme Studios was in. Because, dude, this would have been, like, a top 3 Extreme Studios artist if he'd have shown up at the right time in history.
Who was that one guy who was doing those like Supreme comics, that like Palo or something like
Petty.
that?
And I've tracked down, I think he did 2 issues, and I've tracked those down, and it's bizarre. Like, there's McFarlane, there's Platt.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cool. Very strange, though. But you can see, like, you know, to me, this is such a Platt kind of, all of it, the weapon.
It's really getting so away from the guy and stuff. Like I would bet that the guy doesn't even know what he's drawing right there. And this is that very specific, like, this is that Bloodshot Prophet comic came out, because that was the drawing that was on that previous page is definitely that.
Yeah, I mean, this is my sweet spot for Platt. You know, it's definitely the stuff.
And this guy's too, probably. So it's like we're not getting it. You know, that was the void that like the Image dudes had with Art Adams. It's like, okay, we're not going to get more than 2 Art Adams comics in a year. Like, we'll be the worst versions and just put them out more regularly.
Jim Lee.
Totally.
That's a Jim Lee face. You could probably find a dozen versions of that face out there. But I love it.
It's fun. He starts to powder. Like towards the end, he's done. Like he shot his fucking load, and it's over for him.
That's a really great panel. I don't know, I don't know if that's a swipe from something or not, but that's a really good panel. It's not one I recognize off the bat, but the amount of hatching that everybody would do, like, that was such a trend. That kind of like hatch the face, like, you can't put too many lines on it.
And then that one, where like that's Scott Williams' tick right there.
Totally.
Like what are you telling us with that?
So I have a million questions for people to make comments all over this video, and one of them is, tell me more about either of these artists. If they've got like a body of work, put it out there.
See, it triggers me because these are the ladies that would be coming to the Pittsburgh Comic Con. Like Everett Hartsough had the big booth.
Oh yeah,
and he would bring like all those chicks.
I don't know if I've said it before on air, Ed, but my first time was setting up at Pittsburgh in the Playmate Everett Hartsough kind of aisle, where it was all women of various, I think from like 1970s Playmate up to like, I think just hookers were at one end of the aisle.
Yeah.
And that's what I was in the middle of my first comic convention.
With your big yellow jumpsuits and shit.
Insanity, right?
Yeah.
Absolute insanity.
My brother saw his first female pubes at the Everett Hartsough table because some lady's G-string was all to the side.
I like this.
And then the next year, like some Catholic league or something caused a lot of trouble because they were like, you guys are advertising this with Spider-Man on the cover. We brought our kids to this thing, and you have these chicks who are taking their titty out, putting lipstick on their nipple, and pressing a blank business card to their nipple and charging dudes $50 for that.
I was very confused by that.
And Gloria Ann Gilbert was her name, and she had a line out the building.
They did good business all weekend when I was there. I think I sold 2 comic books all weekend. There were lines at tables. All right, so the last artist here that I have as being, stylized a lot, copied from other people, is Frank Miller.
Yes.
Post Sin City, it was like everybody did some version of Frank Miller, and these are really cool because, like, this is Barry Kitson. Somebody gave us this at Baltimore, I believe. If you know Barry Kitson's art, it does not look like this at all. I think this was like a 1-issue experiment with this, possibly a deadline issue, because this one looks fast to me. But it's completely different than his work, but it's that very heavy blacks, no real outlines. You look at like this Batman, that colorist is doing pretty heavy lifting because, the cow is not defined by buildings or some kind of shadow there. It's like, have the colorist go in there and add that piece. I'd be curious to see these in black and white, actually.
This kind of style is built for black and white. It's a joke to put it in color. Like, even when Frank Miller, we've seen color Sin City Comics, with that last Helen back. Yeah. He doesn't draw it this way for color. Like, so these guys, this is that classic thing. They're just taking the surface elements of something that's popular and trying to use it to, gain some clout.
Yeah, I think that it was one of those things like, I mean, my sketchbooks at the time were completely full of this stuff. I think that everybody just saw it and was blown away. And then it was like, how does this work? How do you play with this? What can you do with it? I think there was backlash against the image Scott Williams, like heavy, 10,000 lines cross-hatched on a face, like just make it black or white. So I think there's some interesting stuff here. And it's cool whenever an artist like a Barry Kitson, who he's a guy that draws everything. If you look at his work, it's not like a shortcut guy. He knows what he's doing. So this is like a real experimental comic. I can't think of anything else of his that looks anything like this.
Yeah.
But we're going to see, like I said, everybody does versions of this. This is the Image X month. We looked at this in depth. Rob Liefeld, I think, doing some treatment of this. And I think at some point, they're talking to each other, because like Jim Lee does Death Blow. And I think you see, oh, okay, the Death Blow, there's some Death Blow-esque elements in here.
Yeah.
But this is that same deal where, like, I'd love to see this in black and white.
Yeah, and you can find those pages on Comic Art Fans and places like that. But, I mean, that was clearly Marv on that previous page. It's like, is there a doubt?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to see guys with established styles trying their hand at this kind of thing.
And the thing that they all miss that Miller would do with his thing is he would use pen also. Like, so these guys are just capturing those solid black forms, but not some of the other pieces.
I forgot about this. The Bill Morrison. It's kind of a funny example because, like, you think of The Simpsons, it's the same deal. Like, all of those Bongo comics that look like they were on model are artists that are essentially copying a style guide.
Yeah, yeah.
It's almost, in some ways, this is house style, right? Where an artist is putting their style a little bit under in order to make it fit and work right. This is Huntress, and I have 3 out of 4 issues of this, and it's great because it forms somehow.
I have this.
Here we go.
Yeah, I have this run.
I love, there's a few of these. There's a Travis Charest did this with Wildstorm Comics where like 9 covers fit together. Frank Miller did it with Valiant and Unity where like the 8 covers all loosely fit together. So you get it here. I don't know if this is an homage to Unity or not, but it's definitely in line with that kind of Miller-esque style.
Here's the thing, though. This is Mike Netzer. And Mike Netzer is also Mike Nasser, who had a very Neil Adams style in the early 80s. That's a guy that could easily be the subject of like Copycat. He churned out Copycats. But Netzer had just the most egregious kind of Neil Adams style in the early 80s. And he, in fact, was in litigation against Neil Adams, saying that he created the Miss Mystic character, and that
Okay.
Neil Adams took it. So this guy, I feel like this guy actually got shamed a lot because he was the Neil Adams goof, and now he's like the Frank Miller
Right.
goof.
It was some of my reservation of doing an episode like this is that I don't view this shamefully. Like to me, I like seeing this. Like, it's really interesting to me to see, like, how does somebody try to make this work? Like, this is one of those where your colorist is doing a bunch of drawing, and I wish he wasn't. Like,
It's built for black and white.
Every piece of this I'd rather see in black and white.
Yeah.
And, this is what your alternative is, where it's just like this busy kind of line-heavy style. So I can see why, people would kind of go and want to do this. And I think there are some artists that really made that style work for them and developed a strong black and white. Deathblow, I think we've talked about maybe just on Darker Image, but there's conversation in Wizard magazines where
Frank Miller was not cool with this.
no, he wasn't, and I think Jim Lee's pretty clear on how much of an influence Miller was. Like, he talked about, like, they would photocopy the Sin Cities from Dark Horse Presents and make their own
TPBs.
Bootleg of Sin City. So, clearly that was an influence that Jim Lee was looking at. Speaking of Jay Lee of that era.
There it is, man. This stuff, with this kind of clear line, Jeff Darrow was out at that time with Hard Boiled and things. But there's also like and if you just keep going, like when we see the side view of Lynch, there's there's Jay Lee built into that also.
There's definitely, all these guys bring other stuff. This feels like you're going outside of the Miller language quite a bit. And I would even say, like, whenever you go to this extreme of, like, the very fine white lines or negative space, it's pushing that Miller style to, like, an nth degree.
Yeah, but there's Carlos Esquerza in this stuff to me. It might be more like the Deathmate Red. Or no. What was Darker Image? No, Darker Image.
Yeah.
Or, Darker Image 1. Is that what it's called?
Yep. This is probably one that's very far you can see outside of the Frank Miller Sin City-esque element, which I think happens. You know, like when Tim Sell comes on board in issue 3, you kind of see it again where it's like there's a starting point that might be Sin City, but then also it's just going much, much further. All right, man.
Curious about this stuff. I don't know it.
This is, you can see right from the get-go, I think, on this cover. To me, there's a lot of death blow is what you're seeing.
Right.
This first issue, probably not as much, but there are glimpses of it.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
like some of that. I mean, that's
that image.
Yeah, it really feels close. You know, close to that one. But as this goes forward, it becomes, I think, more and more pronounced. There's so much coloring on this that it's not quite as obvious. But what I see in this, a lack of outline and just big solid blacks.
Right.
And it's a little bit sloppy in some cases, and it might not be the right word because it's not meant as a negative way, but it feels loose. You know, like the way these marks, they're not as planned or organized as what we saw in Deathblow or what we saw in probably the first Sin City, for example. But it's definitely built on like these big, thick pieces of ink just laid down, and even like just negative outlines for your figures, like reverse silhouettes as you come through here. Again, not closing off your kind of open edges with a line. And you can see there's this is in dialogue with Deathblow, right?
Sure.
But I think it is still part of that school of the Sin Cities and what Frank Miller, man, Sin City had an influence.
It did.
You know?
It did. In interviews and things, he would always talk about like the guys who were cribbing, and I knew the big ones, but to see a video like this and to actually get to check that stuff out, it's very cool.
So this is Ben Torrey's doing Night Watchmen. There was an image version. It's exactly the same comic, so a reprint of that. And this is part of the Big Bang comics. Some were self-published, some were Caliber, some were Image Comics. Some of this stuff, though, to me is super Frank Miller-esque as well as this, and it's not just the Sin City reference. You know, this is stuff that we've seen all the way back to Daredevil.
Yeah, I was just looking because it looks like maybe some lettering differences. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny that I ended up with... I have one issue of each of these series, and it's the same stupid issue.
Right.
So dumb. But you can see the heavy blacks. He's doing a few other things. You know, it's not straight Miller, but some of the Miller stuff actually goes back to things like Dark Knight Returns, to Daredevil. And I think it's pretty clear that Miller is your big predominant influence on this style.
Though I seen this in X-Force 1.
Fair enough.
With Brian Murray color.
Yeah, you know, like some of the shadows around this face.
He's like in his hospital bed with like bandages and his mask on. Is that what that is?
Die with your mask on, right? He read Brat Pack. You know, almost the Miller-esque Joker.
Fun.
Yeah, so a lot of these Frank Millers, and honestly, I could have pulled out probably 20 more of the Frank Millers. It's a matter of going through the collection and trying to think of like which comics do this. Scott McDaniel Daredevil was something I was buying at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know that one because I remember that was when I was most aping the Frank Miller stuff in my sketchbooks. And so Scott McDaniel I'd look at, and it was kind of the same thing of like blacks but no outlines. And I can remember talking to Ernie Steiner, the first pro I ever really talked to, and we talked about that, the style and how that Miller style was really influencing all kinds of stuff. And he thought I nailed it pretty well, but for what that's worth, you know, like that's not obviously the way I broke in. But
yeah, I feel like Steiner even used a little bit of that in like this. He did some pieces in like an X-Men annual or something that had like the heavy blacks, and maybe it was more Mignola. I got to look at that shit again.
And you know, the fun part of this conversation is you can look at that Miller stuff and then be like, oh, we can go back to like a bunch of European guys that were doing some of this stuff. You know, the Hugo Pratts. There's a lot of mark making in Hugo Pratt that I think you can see on Frank Miller's Sin City
Goseki
pages.
Kojima, anyone?
Yeah, man, for Ronin. So, anyway, to me, this is the fun stuff, and I hope that we see some comments that kind of build on this, because I think this is how you connect the dots of comics history and what these influences are, and some are bigger than others.
Absolutely, man. Good stuff. Fun video. Put your comments directly below. Let's keep the conversation rocking. And, man, covered a lot of comics, a lot of ground today, and the Kayfabe effect is real. The people who benefit the most are the King Kayfabers who support the Patreon, get to see these videos before anybody else. In the description below, you can get there. But there's many ways to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Jimmy, tell the people what you have out there.
Hulk Grand Design coming to comic shops in February. Big oversized edition, fluorescent ink on the cover. I got an advanced copy and posted a video about that. Highly recommend you guys reserve your copy today at your local comic shop or pre-order it if you haven't already, because they are selling fast on Amazon. Street Angel Deadly Squirrel Live, Plain Jane's also available, and Street Angel Princess of Poverty available for pre-order. You can also join my Patreon at patreon.com/JimRugg and see a lot more of my comics and art and what I'm working on. My most recent post, updates on the big oil painting stuff that I did last week. So check that out, and back to you, Ed.
All right, man. Crypto Killers. Red Room Crypto Killers issue number 1 is being solicited in comic shops right now. We're going to put it out on a monthly basis for 4 complete issues. It's not getting a trade paperback this year, so if you want to read the comics, you got to get those OG issues. 2 trade paperbacks for Red Room are out there right now: The Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings. 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree Comics. I'm serializing the new Red Room comics on my Patreon before anybody gets to see. $3 for that. More than 300 pages of comics up there now. X-Men Grand Design is out there. WYSIWYG. A lot of ways to support the books. But what else do we have, Jim?
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, stickers, mugs, fanny packs, and more at our spread shop. That link is also below this video.
Great ways to support the channel. Keep these videos rocking. Give them those marching orders. We'll be on our way.
Read more comics.
All right, King Kayfabers, man. It's 10:30. Me and Jimmy got to break shit down. Go on, like where I posted the video on the Patreon. Any questions that might come up, include them in the comments below that. I'm going to keep the phone with me. I'm going to keep kind of scrolling through the comments and stuff as we are talking with Bolland. But we're talking to him in a half hour. We got to break this down, set up in the other room, get all the internet logistics working and things. We don't stream for the new patrons. We do not stream the interviews because we need 100% of the internet connection to just have a smooth conversation with no max headroom shit happening. But Jimmy's going to edit this one. I would say that should be the first thing you edit. I feel like this should be the second because I want to put this one out sooner than later. But you're going to get to see the full conversation before anybody else. But let's go have that conversation, Jimmy.
Yeah, sounds good.
Filibuster for 2 seconds while I close out the stream.
Thanks as always for joining us this week. I do enjoy these. I have been enjoying these live streams with everybody chipping in. It's very kind of fun to have that conversation going. So thank you all for being here. And man, thanks to everybody who put Hulk over the top last week. That was a wild thing to watch happen in real time. So thank you all for that.
And check this out, guys. Here's a little behind the scenes gimmick right here. Like this is the mail that came in last week. That, like, if you could just move your chair in some, like all of that.
That's just. Yeah, that's what else we'll be doing today is breaking down some of those boxes.
It was far more than I could fit in the trunk of my car. Like I had to start putting stuff in the back seat because there was so much shit.
Yeah, I brought one box.
And you're gonna be bringing some of these boxes home.
I was not prepared.
No.
That's a lot. That's a big week.
All right, guys, we're gonna go set up for Bolland. Wish us luck and keep your questions coming in the